Greetings, lovers of lore and legend. Whether you are a student, teacher, parent, storyteller, or draconic interlocutor committed to higgy with the horde.
The Great Tales is a podcast about myths and legends from both inside and outside the Christian tradition. Twice a month, we bring you the stories that Christians have read, retold, and wrestled with for centuries.
Last year, we suffered under the blistering, hot Theban summer, those endless Oedipal episodes. But today, with this new year, Happy New Year, everybody, we're beginning a new hashtag hoary northern winter. Hoary is a great word that people feel embarrassed to say. We're going to be talking the Völsungasaga. So who knows how many episodes this will stretch into? Could this even be the year of the Northman? You don't know.
I'm told that the hoary head is a crown of glory if it is found in the way of righteousness.
Oh, yes. By the hoary hosts of Hoggoth.
I'm getting a little hoarier by the day here. So yes, this tradition of storytelling is huge. But unless you're a particular fan of sagas and also the things that come before the sagas, which is what I'm even more interested in, even if you're into Norse mythology, you may not have heard some of these stories, or you may just only know them through vague images of fat ladies standing on a stage wearing a horned helmet.
Yes. It ain't over till the fat lady sings.
Yeah, so that said, if you have heritage from Western or Northern Europe, this set of stories was almost certainly one of the most popular things being read and told at firesides by your medieval ancestors, though more about that later.
Yeah, indeed. So I thought, I should just tell everybody that this is one of these subjects, like many of our subjects on this podcast, that Deacon Seraphim has this massive library of notes that he's been compiling for decades upon decades. And so that being the case, even though it's not in the script, I'm going to ask Deacon Seraphim, if you are in an elevator with someone and someone's like, hey, I heard that you're doing an episode on the Völsungasaga. What even is that?
Oh,
and you have 1 minute to tell them what the Völsungasaga is. What do you say?
That's a great question. Yeah, you could have given me a little prep for that. So here's what I would say. I would say that it's a story about a man who loves a woman very much. And unfortunately, she loves another man, and he loves another woman, and it is what you could sort of call a love polygon. And at its story, at its heart, it's a story about broken oaths. It's a story about mutually exclusive oaths. It's a story about men who will do anything to get what they want, and of the tragic heroes caught in between.
Yeah. And we're going to kind of introduce it. Well, I should say, this is going to be a bunch of episodes. I don't know how, we haven't planned exactly how many as yet, but this is going to be a bunch of episodes. This is the best story you've probably never read, in my opinion. It's one of the most, magnificent set of stories that's sort of deeply embedded in the heart of Northwestern Europe.
Yeah, and it used to be really well known. So in the 19th century, obviously, you had Wagner, who tells the High German version of the story with his own interpolations, of course. But the problem is that Wagner and a lot of this other source material was very popular with certain Viennese painters, and
right.
And
right.
political and movements and military campaigns, which sad painters began.
Yeah, and I mean, it is the case that certain, political views of certain kinds of painters. I love how we're trying to avoid the algorithm from.
I mostly just don't want to get Ancient Faiths demonetized. That's all it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
But even now, there are certain people in particular kind of political sectors that really gravitate towards the stories of the Norse, and including this one in particular. But the reality is these stories long predate all of that. These were simply the stories of a whole culture. and they were used, as we're going to mention here, by a lot of folks and a lot of stories that modern people are probably a lot more familiar with. So we're going to mention some of that. And I've wanted to do a deep dive into this. I have to say that my knowledge of the Völsungasaga right now is relative. I would say relatively minimal. I know a lot about one particular episode of the story, and that's the one we're going to be covering today. But I'm going to trust you, Deacon Seraphim, to fill in all of the
we're going to be learning a whole lot more. We're going to be learning a whole lot more. We'll talk about this a little bit next time, but next time is going to be like the real. Like, we're going to go deep down the philology hole next time, in the sense that we're going to talk about source texts and, the evolution of certain characters. For instance, we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at the slaying of Fáfnir by Sigurd. But of course, Sigurd is not the original slayer of Fáfnir. So that's one huge change that was made in this story actually quite late on. So just for a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about, first of all, what we mean when we talk about a saga. A saga is a prose narrative. A saga is a prose narrative. Comes from the Old Norse word, the Old Icelandic word, which just means the said thing, which is what most traditional names for traditional stories mean in most languages. But it's a prose narrative, and this does not mean that it doesn't have verse in it. One of the most common things that is done with sagas is to take older verses that predate the telling of the saga itself and to basically put them in the saga as kind of a wrapper. WRAPPER, I should say. The reason that this is done is to make sure that the context of those verses, which are very often kind of hard to understand if you don't know the context for the rest of the story, the context for those verses is reserved. So poetry is usually earlier, sagas are much later. So the poetry that this story is based on, some of it goes back to being the oldest, some of the candidates for some of the oldest surviving Germanic poetry. The Völsungasaga itself is written in the 13th century, so it's quite late as these things go. And when we say the Völsungasaga, okay, so what does that mean? Is that a particular book? It's not a particular book. Now, there is a prose text that is generally called the Völsungasaga, and sort of Völsungasaga proper, as it were. And that's going to be, in some ways, the main thing that we're going to be looking at. But there's also elements of these stories in the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson, which we already introduced a number of episodes ago, in the Poetic Edda, which is what it says in the label, basically. And then also there is a German version of some of these stories called the Nibelungenlied. Man, I never get that right. I never get that right. Yeah, for some reason, I struggle with lots of other words, but I can say Nibelungenlied. Although what I would say is that there's actually strong evidence to suggest that the Völsungasaga is influenced by the continental German version. This is the way the story kind of goes like this. Again, I'm just giving cliff notes here. We'll dig into it more next time. But the story basically goes, it is probably originally a German story, which then goes to Scandinavia, which then comes back to Germany, which then goes back to Scandinavia. So it's kind of constantly recrossing and crossing between Scandinavia and continental Europe. And every time it moves, or every time it's kind of transmitted, it picks up these certain details. So in the saga, and I think this is why it was so appealing to people like Tolkien and obviously the Grimms and Wagner, the story has both elements of just like those old, hard Iron Age Germanic stuff, with mythical creatures, monsters, gods, etc. But then also it has a lot of stuff that we would basically expect to encounter in an Arthurian romance, love potions, marrying one woman but actually loving another, having the spell broken, all these charms and spells and things like this. So there's kind of those two elements to it, and that combination of things I think is just particularly wonderful. It's why I've loved this story since I was a kid. But it makes it one of the most difficult medieval stories other than probably the Arthurian material itself, there's no more difficult story from the Middle Ages to kind of piece together the origins of the different elements of the story, if that's something you even care about doing. It's not going to be what we're doing today, but
no. I mean, we'll get into some of that, but like we've talked, I think it's good to bring up the Arthurian stories because, as we mentioned when we talked about the Grail story, there's no one Grail story. There's a whole set of traditions that kind of overlap and don't always, they're not always compatible with each other. And the Völsungasaga is not quite as complex as the Arthurian material in that regard, but it's still it's a set of traditions. I think is probably the best way to describe it. And not every version has the same stuff.
The last thing to mention would be maybe why it survived the way that it does, like why the saga was composed, which is and survives, which is that ultimately it is deeply connected to the Viking Age figure of Ragnar Lothbrokki, who is a real piece of work and a real historical person. And what the saga authors do, so they read when they write the saga of Ragnar Lothbrokki, and of course, like his descendants who are invading England. What they do is they tie the story of Ragnar, tie his lineage back to that of the Völsungs, right? And so this is kind of it's a really important thing, and so that's basically kind of what ensures the survival of this particular saga. I will say there are lots of other really excellent sagas from the same vintage, which are not nearly as well known. And that is because they're, the people claiming them weren't, trying to invade England at the time.
Right. And yeah, I mean, we should say, like, this is the first real, I think this is the first saga as a saga that we've looked at here in the Great Tales.
We read some bits. We read some bits for our Halloween episode. We read some bits from
yes,
one
that's
of the
true. That's true.
The Icelandic family sagas.
That's true.
Yeah.
But there's piles of sagas. I mean, this is a whole genre. But if you're going to know one, I think this is the one to know, probably. But God willing, you'll know more than one by the time we're done with this podcast, 20, 30 years from now.
I don't know. We'll see how you still feel once we do Greta's saga. We'll see how you feel. We'll see how you feel.
Okay.
I mean, no shade against Völsungasaga, but
yeah, sure. But I will say, so the title, right? Völsungasaga. It's the saga of the Völsungs, and the Völsungs are a clan. Like, this is a family. So this is their family story, is what this is, and it's very episodic. There's not one big arc really that covers the whole thing. This is family history in a very real sense. So if you look at the actual, I'm going to give just sort of a very brief outline of the story. It's kind of in 7 parts. So the first part is the ancestors of Völsung himself. He's kind of the pivotal named character, although not really the most important character in some ways, but he's
of course born large and in charge. His mother gave birth to him after a 6-year pregnancy, following the eating of a magical apple, as one does, and eventually she dies in childbirth, as you would expect after a 6-year pregnancy. But he basically comes out like a fully grown man and kisses his mother before she dies, and that's Völsung. Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, that's definitely the guy to name your family after.
It's important not to forget these, these origins, because Völsung's name, it might be related to the clan, the Walsings in Beowulf, but some people also think it is basically how do I put this, related to ancient Scandinavian fertility cults.
Yeah. So one thing that's in that section that's really important to know is that Siggy, who is sort of the Volsung, he is a son of Odin. And so this family is of divine blood. which actually pretty much every major family in these sagas is descended typically from Odin. That's a big deal. So the first part is essentially the prehistory of Völsung, the people he's descended from. And then the second part is his life, which would, then tell the story about the six-year pregnancy. Yes. And then the third is a war against Sigurd. And then finally in the fourth part, you get Sigurd himself, who is one of the two truly pivotal characters. I mean, he is literally the pivotal character in the saga, if maybe not the most important. I don't know. We'll talk about that. He's a big deal, that's for sure. There's some other real big deals in this story. So he gets introduced in part 4, and it's about him and his foster family. And this is where we get the story that we're going to look at today, which is about Fáfnir the dragon. And the fifth part is Sigurd and a group called the Gjukings. So when you see these names, this is an anglicization of a Norse form. So a Gjuking is the people, the Gjukis people. So the Völsungs are, this introduces this family. And then another significant character is introduced in the midst of this, a woman named Gudrun. And so then the sixth part is Gudrun and the Budlings. So that's another clan. And then the seventh
and skipped over the other very important character.
Oh yes, Brynhild.
Right to Gudrun. My gosh, I guess we know which team you're on now.
No, I'm on Team Brynhild actually. Mm-hmm, I mean, Gudrun is a very formidable woman, but I mean, she does tend to light a room on fire. That's what I'll say about her.
Yeah, yes. So Brynhild is the she's historically probably the most important person in the saga, in the sense that one of the arguments that is made for how this body of legends comes together, which is probably originally a collection of two or three different family stories from different powerful Iron Age chieftain clans, is that the figure of Brynhild is actually the person who ties them all together. And so it's almost like in the story there's two different Brynhilds, in terms of she has one personality and then kind of the other, and that may be the fact that originally this was kind of two different characters. There is, in some of the older sources, there is like a third woman involved in the whole love triangle that it seems like the Völsungasaga author kind of merges into Brynhild. So anyway.
Anyways, and then the last part is Gudrun's last marriage, and this is the bit where Attila the Hun and all of them are kind of involved. Although in this text he's not called Attila, it's Atli. But you can, Atli, you can see how that's related.
Well, that's to Attila. Probably what it originally was anyway.
Yeah, that's right, because it's probably a Gothic name that means something like
name.
Big Daddy or something to that effect.
Little Daddy, actually.
Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah,
Little Big Daddy. Big Little Daddy, because, So that's sort of the outline of the saga proper. There's a bunch of different themes to look at, but I just... some easy ones that you can sort of follow throughout the whole thing. I'll just mention two, and if you can add more if you'd like. One is Odin. Odin shows up, of course, in Norse it's Odin, but Odin is how it usually is in English, although in Old English it was Woden. He shows up a lot, and I think one of the things that's really important to point out here is that this is actually this is very typical Odin in the way that he shows up in Norse literature. Odin in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is like a king sitting on a throne, ruling over a kingdom. But in actual Norse literature, Odin, yes, he is the All-Father, et cetera, but he's mostly a guy who shows up and messes with people and does things and pokes things and does little twists, and he's this wanderer. And like Tolkien actually said that Gandalf was based in some ways on Odin. He's a wanderer. He's a patron of magic. He's a patron of wisdom. He's a patron of kings. But he's almost never depicted.
And very importantly, poetry.
Yes, exactly, which is very related to magic, of course. He's almost never actually sitting there like ruling at running a kingdom. He's that's almost never what he does. He's a meddler. This is sort of his main thing that he does. The other thing that I think is really a big theme to follow, and I think this is good because this will connect with some stories that people know a little bit better. There is a magical ring, and it's called, I'm going to mispronounce it, I'm sure, Andvaranaut. Andvaranaut? Is that Andvaranaut? I don't know. My Norse is not great. This ring kind of, crosses through a number of the elements of this story. It is magical. It is bad news. Those are the basic things to know about that. It is connected with a magical dwarf named Andvari. We will, of course, meet him today when we talk about the Fáfnir story. So, yeah, any other big themes that people should be watching as we go through all this stuff?
So I would mention a couple of things. The first is that Odin's role in the saga is not just as a meddler. The thing that Odin specifically does is he chooses the slain. He decides the fate. And so early on, like during the the early bit of the story, that's dealing with the adventures of the early Völsung members of the Völsung clan. Basically these guys are invincible until some old guy shows up on the battlefield and breaks their sword or something else like that happens. And then, of course, the thing you're meant to, this might look like your enemy to you because Odin is, above all other things, he's a shapeshifter. This might look like your enemy to you, but in actuality, it's Odin, and he's come to say, all right, you had a good run. Time's up. And the people who assist him in this are specifically the Valkyries. We'll say a lot more about them maybe next episode. Very interesting kind of ancient Indo-European belief that connects them with, well, lots of interesting things.
Yes.
And the Valkyries are the choosers of the slain. They're basically, Odin marks men for death on a battlefield, and they go out. Why is Odin doing all of this? To populate his own hall of Valhalla, as most people usually call it. Why? Because the end of the world is coming, and he needs all the best warriors on his side to fight a battle against the monsters, which they will ultimately lose. So this is the backdrop to every interaction that you have with Odin, and that is why there is a sort of grim, I wouldn't say helplessness, but kind of just almost like a grim resolution, a grim kind of acceptance of reality that this is what the world is. This is
a certain brand of fatalism.
Yes, it's an acceptance that the world is, that life is suffering, that the best thing you can do is keep a stiff upper lip and go and do what a hero is supposed to do, which is fight monsters, gather treasure, like just do the best things you can, because ultimately when Odin comes for you, it won't matter. It won't matter. So,
well, and I mean, like a lot of this, for fans of Star Trek, a lot of this forms the backdrop for the lore that becomes the Klingons. Now, not Klingons as they are probably in original series and so forth, but Klingons basically as they're kind of revealed through Worf in Next Generation and particularly Deep Space Nine. This sense of honorable warriorhood, but ultimately everyone goes to the place of this. Well, at least the best ones go to a certain place of the slain, right? Like Stovelkor is sort of the Valhalla of the Klingons. One of the next segment we're going to have is we're going to talk about a lot of the things that owe their, in many ways, cases, their heart and soul to this saga and the tradition generally that it represents. But yeah, Klingons and Star Trek definitely are kind of based on this idea. They're not the same, obviously, but there's something very, very similar there. And so you should have all of that kind of thing in mind.
Yeah. The other thing I would mention just regarding the ring, Andvaranaut is it's not a magical ring in the sense like the One Ring is a magical ring, although it is in most of the senses that the One Ring is a magical ring. What I mean by that is Tolkien has played everybody from the beginning on the whole ring thing, because the whole Lord of the Rings, the only magical thing you ever see the ring used to do is to turn people invisible, which is like a pretty basic use, and it really built up to like do all these other things. It's got this massive corrupting power, but you never see it. You just know it's there. That's the way in which Andwaranat is a magical ring. It is cursed. Andvari curses it after Loki steals his treasure and steals the ring. He curses it, and then basically Loki's like, well, I don't want any of this curse, so he passes the cursed ring onto Hríðmar, the king of the dwarves. We'll talk more about him in a couple of weeks, I think. And then basically that gets passed on to Hríðmar's son Ottar, and so on and so forth. So basically the cursed, this little piece of cursed treasure, which is part of a larger hoard, which has a curse on it. And you can think about the way in which any gold magical hoard in an age of hyper violent people who need to, above all else, control treasure. Any amount of treasure is actually cursed in the sense that if you have it, it means somebody else wants it. Yeah. And the ring kind of becomes the token of that. But then as the ring changes hands, ultimately it comes to Sigurd or Siegfried, who then gives it to who then gives it to Brynhild. But then another one of the most interesting characters in the whole thing, the evil queen Grimhild. She is going to basically convince Brynhild to marry her son, and so then her family gets the ring, and then that brings the whole curse finally crashing down on her. So it's basically, it's like through her greed, through her avarice, all these things, all the curse that's sort of been gaining steam, building up momentum, comes crashing down on her house. And in the process, of course, all of our favorite characters die, except for Gudrun, who will. And I've always, ever since the first time I read this, I was very team Gudrun, and I think it was because I felt sorry for her. Because I was like, man, come on, Sigurd, like, just let's like settle down with a woman, like, just she seems great. And she sort of gets, she gets her revenge in the end. That's how the whole saga's going to end. We
wouldn't have much of a story if he just decided to live happily ever after.
Yeah, that is always how it goes. So
yeah, I would. Anyway, I will also add probably, but based on what you just said, another big theme is greed. Greed is definitely a big driver of a lot of the story, frankly. So. Yeah. Okay.
I would say that just the last main theme I would mention, because it's really, really important, is the way that, and this would be in general, if you're reading an Icelandic saga, this is something to look for, is the way that overlapping responsibilities, oaths you have taken, oaths you have sworn, the basic responsibilities of friendship and family, especially the responsibility to avenge the fallen, all those things, the way that those responsibilities then butt up against each other, and the tension that creates, and what happens when you try to avoid those responsibilities for the sake of peace and just try to live in harmony, the way that things go wrong. That's kind of the overarching thing in the saga, and that's the thing that the ancient Norse were most interested in. So that'll be an element to look for as we go.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to make mention now of a number of derivative works or influenced works, adaptations that people might have heard of or should have heard of. In many cases, we're not going to go into them. We're just going to kind of mention them. Why are you shaking your head?
It's because I just saw number 2 on the list.
No. Well. All right. So you've already mentioned Wagner, right? So Richard Wagner, which looks like Richard Wagner to those of you who have never seen it written. Richard Wagner has an opera called The Ring Cycle. And The Ring Cycle is huge. It is 15 hours long. And traditionally, if you're going to actually do a full production of this, it takes 4 nights. Now, divide 15 hours by 4 nights, and you're still there for more than 3 hours a night. Almost 4 hours every night. Like, this is a lot of opera.
This is the only thing people had before the extended version of the Lord of the Rings trilogy came out on Blu-ray.
Yeah, I mean, this was people's binge watching before TV and stuff. stuff. It's this opera that gives everybody their, stereotypical caricatures of what Vikings are. The horned helmet, the fat lady singing, right? Like this is being represented in like Bugs Bunny, and Bugs Bunny mentions, this is there. The most famous piece of music from this opera is the Ride of the Valkyries, dun da da dun 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 da da dun 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 da dun dun, which gets played in a lot of movie trailers when something bad is about to happen, or when there's someone is about to go kick tail or whatever. You hear the Ride of the Valkyries. I have to give special mention to something that has a very warm place in my heart, and that is a little documentary film called Sing Faster. Have you heard me mention this before, Deacon Seraphim? About 10 times? Yeah. So Sing Faster, subtitle, The Stagehand's Ring Cycle, is indeed an actual production of Wagner's Ring Cycle from the point of view of the stagehands. And I love this because, and it's only about an hour long. It's not 15 hours like the opera. I love this because I was a stagehand for 10 years, but also just kind of gives you a taste of what stagehand culture is like. Very sarcastic and kind of gritty and fun. There's one point where one of the stagehands is attempting to date one of the Valkyries. And they're of course all aware that this is an incredibly long show. And so at one point, one of the stagehands says, can you, get up on the set piece, sing a little faster, let's get this moving. It's already 15 hours long. And so that's where the title comes from, is Sing Faster. I think it might be out there on YouTube somewhere, but everyone should watch this documentary at least once. It's so fun and funny. And it was my life for 10 years, actually. So there's a lot about it that just warms my heart. The big one that everybody may know about or may think about, of course, is there's lots and lots of stuff in Tolkien that relates to the Völsungasaga. So why don't you just give people some what's the stuff that they wouldn't know about? You mentioned the ring. So there's the ring.
Yeah, I think that it's not so much that the Lord of the Rings is based on the Ring of the Nibelungs or the ring or the ring cycle, so much as it is that it happens in what is functionally the same world. Yeah. So my rule, this is a rule I established when for 7 years I was running a very large campaign of the One Ring RPG. So this is a tabletop role playing game set in Tolkien's world basically in the years between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And my rule was, if I can find a precedent, because obviously there's a lot of corners to fill in when you're doing something like that. There's a lot of stuff that's just on the map that Tolkien doesn't really tell you a whole lot about in Middle-earth. Maybe you get a sentence here or there, or maybe a paragraph if you're lucky. So as you're kind of filling in the details, you're filling in the corners, you're filling in the blanks between things, and trying to say, hey, what would make for a compelling story? My rule is always, well, if it happens in a saga, then it can happen in Arda. That was always the rule. So because this and other things like it are so fundamental to the backdrop of Tolkien's world, down to the kinds of monsters you run across, down to all those different things, and this shows up even more so strongly in some of the earlier Silmarillion materials, where you have individuals who can take on the skin of wolves, or the haim of a wolf. The skin of a wolf is something which can be worn and will make you into a wolf, but you're not necessarily a werewolf in terms of like you're not a species, but you are some kind of a, you take on certain wolf-like qualities for a while, which is one of the things that happens in this saga. Obviously, famous dragon slaying in Tolkien. The most famous dragon slaying in Tolkien, and the one that's most directly parallel to the slaying of Fáfnir, is of course in the Turin Turambar story.
Oh yeah.
But the slaying of Fáfnir it's kind of the Germanic dragon slaying story. So what that means is that every other dragon slaying story that comes after that builds upon it in some way, or plays with the themes in some way. So one of the things that always happens is that when you these sorts of dragons have to be killed from beneath. Yep. Either they have a single weak spot, as Smaug did, or just their entire underside is kind of slick and slimy, like a underside of a snake. whereas the top of them is armored. So you have to, so what the way that Sigurd or Sigismund, the way that they kill the dragon is to dig a trench and basically like lie there in the trench as the dragon is heaving its weight over. And then the Turin story, there's basically like a gorge that they use instead. But it's the same kind of an idea, is the idea that these things have to be killed from beneath. There's a lot of things, one of the things that is part of the deep memory. We talked about this maybe the last time or the time before, but one of the things that's deep in the memory of our ancestors, my ancestors anyway, is this idea is basically the invasion of the Huns. This idea that there are really warlike nomadic horse people who come from the east, and when they come, they overrun everything and they bring destruction and death, and it's all you can do to kind of hold them back. And that is, of course, in the backdrop of this saga. That's how the saga ends. But also, that's in the backdrop of almost everything Tolkien ever wrote. There are Easterlings in the Silmarillion and in the Lord of the Rings. There are the Wayne riders, the various invasions of the Wayne riders, the Easterlings, etc. These are all basically Hunnish, let's say Hunnish, not Hunnic, but Hunnish invasions, which constantly plague the Northmen. Well, who are the Northmen? Well, they're the kind of people who would be in this saga, which is to say, they're not always themselves like particularly upright, moral people, especially by today's standards, but they're, the men of the North standing on the edge of the world with their backs to the great sea, trying to hold back the barbarian hordes. That's the kind of very romantic vision that was created by, that is created by this saga and by some others like it. So, I know we mentioned Haetheric a moment ago. There's another saga, which involves dwarves and a sword and a cursed sword and saking up your dead father from a barrow and all these things. But it's related to Völsungasaga in certain ways. But in that saga, everything kind of culminates in a battle between the Goths and the Huns, and that poem which is contained in the saga, though it vastly predates it. It's probably one of the earliest Germanic poems ever written, right? So this idea of the swords that have lineage, and this idea of a treasure hoard. Well, the treasure hoard is in the Silmarillion is the hoard of Fáfnir, which from Nargothrond, which Turin brings, which has a curse on it. It has Fáfnir's curse. It has Glaurung's. See, yeah, I did it. It's gonna happen a lot tonight. It has Glaurung's curse on it, and it ultimately brings about the ruin of all of the different kingdoms, which then come into possession of it. Yeah. So tons of similarities, just
piles of stuff.
Piles.
Like, Smaug in The Hobbit. Like, it's not just the way that you kill him, but also like the whole fact that the thief comes in and has a whole conversation with him. Yeah. It seems to be merged in with stuff from the Beowulf dragon horde. And then also, this is the part that no one's heard of. There's a text called Sigurd and Gudrun, The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun by Tolkien. And Tolkien wrote that, and it is, in my opinion, his very best poetry.
It's pretty great. Did we ever do, didn't we do an Amundsul episode on it?
Yes, we did some Amundsul on Sigurd and Gudrun.
But we'll probably do one here too. We'll probably revisit that for this.
Yeah, and it is based on not the prose Völsungasaga, but rather the story as you get it from the poetic Edda. Yeah, so he's looking at what is
poetry,
probably the older poetry. Yeah. We could go on and on about Tolkien and the Völsungasaga. It just goes forever. C.S. Lewis, there's probably several things we could say, but the one that might stick out for people, which you don't have all the data yet if you don't know this story that we're going to talk about with Fáfnir, but in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, there is a very famous arc within that about the character Eustace Clarence Scrubb, who almost deserved that name, and how he gets transformed into a dragon because of greed when they're on the island that they ultimately call Deathwater. And that, frankly, is straight out of Völsungasaga. In fact, the very part that we're talking about, the sense of...
Deathwater Island is a different island than the Eustace Island.
Didn't they call it Goldwater initially? No, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Two different episodes, but
obviously,
in any case,
yes. But still both about death that comes because of Greed. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You're right. Excuse me. So, and then also...
I'm a naturalized citizen of Narnia, so this was on the citizenship test.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, very important honorable mention, William Morris. So William Morris... Tolkien was a big fan of William Morris. He read, there's a text called The House of the Wolfings, which is a novel that has some connection to the Völsungasaga.
Yeah, but it's also kind of like a proto-fantasy novel. It's pretty great.
Yeah. If you want to kind of get some sense of what comes before the Lord of the Rings and stuff, you should read House of the Wolfings.
The actual title of the book is The House of the Wolfings and All the Kindreds of the Mark.
There you go. So William Morris did a translation of the Völsungasaga, which I think is titled something like The Story of the Völsungs. And when he did his translation, he inserted stuff from the Poetic Edda. And that's actually going to show up in our text that we're going to be looking at today. But that's a totally normal thing to do in sagas. So he's kind of reincorporating some of this stuff. He also did an epic poem. He wrote his own epic poem of the Völsungasaga. So he's one of the reasons that it's been kind of introduced to an English-speaking audience in a lot of ways. Another one, the playwright Henrik Ibsen. Oh, did you want to say something about William Morris?
I just have a lot to say about William Morris that I've been holding in for years and years and years. But I think
don't get it all out now. We still have to read Fáfnir.
Probably not the right time. But Morris is amazing. He's the and the sort of like the two grandfathers of the Inklings are George MacDonald and William Morris.
Yeah,
and they are also therefore the grandfathers of Christian fantasy and even fantasy at all existing as a genre. Yeah. It's quite sad to see what many of their children have come to since then, I suppose. But they're really wonderful. The House of the Wolfings it's been a few years now since I've read it, but it's basically a slightly fictionalized version of the lives of the early Gothic tribes in Western Europe, and therefore it's awesome. But also, William Morris is very closely associated with the arts and crafts movement. A lot of interesting things came out of this. G.K. Chesterton was closely related to William Morris in certain ways, and he's just an endlessly interesting person to me. Yeah. I really, really would like to spend some more time talking about his stuff, but maybe
we absolutely will get to that, because I think even though this podcast is specifically about pre-modern works, I think it's good to look at some stuff that connects so directly with that it helps people get into some of these things. Okay, so I mentioned Henrik Ibsen. A lot of you probably read his play Hedda Gabler when you were in high school. I certainly did, suffered through it. The only thing I remember about that play is a guy sticking a gun into like his belt, and ending up it going off and him suffering in the worst possible way that you could when you stick a gun into your pants. But he wrote a play called The Vikings at Helgeland, which is about the Sigurd and Brynhild story. So that is a direct adaptation of part of the Völsungasaga. One of the things that's really fascinating to me is, and I knew about one, but actually one of our Norwegian fans, whose name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but I'm pretty sure is the Norwegian version of Austin as his first name, but it's spelled Oystein. Do you know how to pronounce that?
Austin.
Yeah, I feel like that's Austin, the same name, or Augustine, right? Last name Lid. He commented on our posting that we're going to do this, that there are 7 stave churches.
That's right.
7 stave churches in Norway that feature this saga in one way or another. Christian churches that are featuring images from this saga. That's wild and weird and kind of interesting. Some of this stuff dates back to at least the 12th century. And it's often on what's called the portal, which is a liminal space between essentially the narthex and the nave. You would walk through this, right?
Yeah. Lots of also rune stones in churchyards and sometimes in churches themselves that depict the story.
Yeah. So this is something that Norwegian Christians were reading and depicting and kept.
Probably listening to. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question as to just what about this story, because it's not like you have lots of other sagas showing up on rune stones and stave church carvings in 12th century Scandinavia, 13th century Scandinavia. There's something about this particular story which may be actually very surprising to people once we begin to read it, but maybe not. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, especially when we get to the very, 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 very end. And then the last thing, another note from a listener. We got an email from Sam Cook, who I think is actually active in the chat right now on YouTube, and he told us about something that I'd never heard of, which is that on the Faroe Islands, the Faroese people have a tradition called kvæði, which is, you probably knew about this, didn't you? Yeah, of course you did. I didn't know about this. There is a dancing and singing tradition of the songs based on the Völsungasaga, where groups of people, it's a big communal thing and can go on for hours and hours, where they're telling the story in the song and dance. So this is actually a living connection to these stories that is still going on in the Faroe Islands. And the Faroe Islands are kind of, I don't know, halfway between Scotland and Iceland. Is that about right? Yeah, that's about right. So that's just wild and cool. And you can look up he sent us actually some YouTube links. You can look up on YouTube and see some of this stuff.
Yeah, they're interesting because so the Faroe Islands are basically between like Iceland, Norway, Hebrides, Shetlands, really remote. The Faroese comes up a lot in philological studies because it's very archaic, has a lot of interesting things about it that are useful for studying the history of these languages. And yes, this practice is also something that comes up a lot in terms of mythography. We think that probably even something like the Iliad or the Odyssey would have been obviously not the same, but would have been a kind of part of a communal performance in this kind of a way. And it's just the fact. It's just the fact of the matter that that kind of storytelling is something to which almost none of us have access anymore.
Yeah. I should say, by the way, in the YouTube chat, we actually have someone tuning in from Iceland right now.
Nice.
So
wonderful.
That's pretty cool. Has this happened before? We had someone from the culture that we're discussing.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah. So the Faroe Islands are like, they're dead north of Scotland, which is hard to imagine, but it's just like sort of dead north of Scotland, and you have Norway on this side, and you have Iceland over here.
Yeah.
Like that.
So, okay. So, yeah, there's a lot of other things we could mention in terms of works or traditions that owe something to the Völsungasaga in particular, or the tradition that it represents generally. But I hope, God willing, that'll help you kind of get some sense of how important the story actually is, and why we really want to read it. We're going to do one part of it today, and the reason we're going to do this one part is number one, as I said, this is the part that I know best, but also, if we just simply started at the beginning, with Völsung's ancestors, I think that we might lose some people. Like, why are you even doing this? Except, there's a number of hardcore people out there that would definitely be into it. So I just wanted to kind of jump into one of the really big sort of fun action bits. That's about halfway in. So we're starting from what is usually, chapter 13. But we'll give you enough background. Actually, we're starting with chapter 14, but we're going to give you a little bit of the context from chapter 13 in order to just understand what's going on in this part of the story. Okay, so here's the basic info that you need from prior to chapter 14. So there is a figure called Regin, and Regin has been Sigurd's tutor. So he's had this relationship with him within Sigurd's foster family. One of the things that happens is that Regin tells Sigurd that he needs money. Like, look, buddy, you're growing up. You need money. You have to have money if you're going to, you basically have to go get some gold if you're going to be a real man. And he says, well, where can I get that? He says, oh, you can go get it from Fáfnir's hoard. And Sigurd essentially says, well, hold on a second. I've heard of this dragon. That doesn't seem like such a great idea. And when he says that, then begins chapter 14, and Regin begins telling him the story of where this horde comes from. So in what we're going to read today, you're going to hear about where the horde comes from, and then also about how Sigurd went and laid claim to it. So that's the basic stuff that's going to occur today.
Should be mentioned that Regin is a dvargar. Dvargir. He's a dwarf.
Yeah, he's not exactly human.
Yeah. He's a dwarf. And do you know what his name in the Norwegian Thidrek is?
I don't know.
It is meme.
Oh, like in the Silmarillion.
Like in the Silmarillion.
How
Anyway,
about
okay.
that?
So,
okay, so why don't would you begin?
Sure.
Would you begin with chapter 14, which is called Otter's Ransom? Well, it doesn't have a title, but that's one title for it. Why don't you go ahead and read this chapter for us, and we'll begin our tale.
All right. The tale begins, said Regin. Hreidmar was my father's name, a mighty man and wealthy. And his first son was named Fáfnir, his second Otter, and I was the third, and the least of all of them both for prowess and good conditions. But I was cunning to work in iron and silver and gold, whereof I could make matters that availed somewhat. Other skill my brother Otter followed, and had another nature withal, for he was a great fisher, and above other men herein, in that he had the likeness of an otter by day, and dwelt ever in the river, and bare fish to bank in his mouth. And his prey would he ever bring to our father, and that availed him much. For the most part he kept him in his otter gear, and he would come home and eat alone, and slumbering, for on the dry land he might see naught. But Fáfnir was by far the greatest and grimmest, and would have all things about called his. Now, says Regin, there's a dwarf called Andvari, who ever abode in that force, which was called Andvari's force, in the likeness of a pike. A force is it's a pool under a waterfall in this story. And got meat for himself, for many fish there were in the force. Now Otter, my brother, was ever wont to enter the force, and bring fish aland, and lay them one by one on the bank. And so it befell that Odin, Loki, and Hunir, as they went their ways, came to Andvari's force. And Otter had taken a salmon, and ate it slumbering upon the river bank. Then Loki took a stone, and cast it at Otter, so that he gat his death thereby. The gods were well content with their prey, and fell to flaying off the otter's skin, and in the evening they came to Hreidmar's house, and showed to him what they had taken. Thinking, just, oh, look at this cool otter that we skinned. Thereon he laid hands on them, and doomed them to such ransom, that they should fill the otter skin with gold, and cover it over without with red gold. So they sent Loki to gather gold together for them, and he came to Ran, and got her net, and went therewith to Andvari's force, and cast the net before the pike, and the pike ran into the net, and was taken. Then said Loki, what fish of all fishes swims strong in the flood, but hath learnt little wit to beware? Thine head must thou buy from abiding in hell, and find me the wan water's flame. So, just this, by the way, this is a riddle. A lot of the surviving verses from kind of the pre-Christianization of the Scandinavian peoples are riddles or what you would call like wisdom literature. There's a whole so this is one of them. That this riddle is certainly older than the text of the saga itself. He answered, Andvari folk call Oin my father. Over many a force have I fared, for a norn of ill luck this life on me lay, through wet ways ever to wade. So Loki beheld the gold of Andvari, and when he had given up the gold, he had but one ring left, and that also Loki took from him. Then the dwarf went into a hollow of the rocks and cried out that gold ring, yea, and all the gold withal, should be the bane of every man who should own it thereafter.
There you go. So this gives us the origin of the horde. Where does it come from? And and also that this ring and the gold are cursed. And I should say, by the way, I didn't mention this, but this is William Morris's translation. So it's got a lot of, it's not only over 100 years old, it has a lot of things that were archaicisms even then written into it. So we'll have to kind of mention what some of these words mean as we go. I mean, I think what William Morris is trying to accomplish here is he wants to make this sound like it's a story of old, a story of yore or whatever. And so he's using very archaic English as we go. Okay, so you mentioned that Regin is I'm going to mispronounce, I'm sure, Draugr.
No, Dvargr. He's a dwarf.
Oh, Dvargr.
Draugr's like a barrow white.
Okay, excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah, but you've got him. You've got
Dvargr in 13th century Icelandic, I think is how you say it.
Okay.
Dvargr.
You've got him.
Dwarf.
You've got
same word.
Otter. Someone in the chat asked, "Is Otter an actual otter?" Well, Otter is sometimes.
Otter is a dude who has the ability to be an otter by day, and actually prefers it. And so when he's on land, he's kind of useless, but he's very clever in the water.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea. He brings fish to his father.
Yeah. There's a lot of shape-shifting that goes on in a lot of these stories. And it seems like one of the things that makes everything else different from humans is the shape-shifting on some level. It's not super clear. Like, what is the difference between a dwarf and an elf in Norse literature?
Yeah, you shouldn't be thinking, Tolkien's taxonomy here, and you shouldn't be thinking like D&D, like
no,
things are distinctive. We're gonna have a dwarf or a guy who is a dwarf. I mean, very often, to be quite frank. When Regin is described in the Poetic Edda, he's described as being the most skillful of men and a dwarf in size. So dwarf is not a species; it's a size, but it's something that comes with various magical abilities. And so, I mean, that's the thing to understand: is all of these people are magical in some way. And shape-shifting is a part of that. I think that the shape-shifting is a part of that. Possessing, these hoards of gold, that's part of it. All those things. And so when Fáfnir, who doesn't start out as a dragon, but he's going to turn into one, that's just sort of like we should expect that kind of thing with this sort of family.
Yeah. By the way, I have to say, while we've been talking, I have been texting, and normally I don't do that, but I got texts from my bishop, and it's good to respond to the bishop when he texts you. And one of the things he said was, greet your listeners for me, please, because I told him what I was doing at the moment. So everyone, this is your greetings from His Grace Bishop Thomas that he just texted me, and would like to give his best wishes to all of you. So there we go. This is Episcopal blessing for our podcast. By the way, we should mention, since we're at this break, yesterday was the feast day of our podcast, because St. Basil the Great is the patron saint of our podcast.
That is true. And yet somehow we did not make an episode on that day.
But we do, of course. Our very first episode is about St. Basil.
Yes.
And since we're broken, this is your feast day. So this is the feast of St. Seraphim of Sarov, not only for you, but for your parish, the cathedral there in Dallas. So
that's right. Yeah.
God grant everybody many years.
We had a wonderful liturgy this morning with one bishop celebrating and another bishop visiting. So we had two bishops in the altar today, and I got to serve with His Grace Bishop Grozum and be there with my fellow parishioners and clergy. It was really wonderful. So, and then I raced home.
Yes.
At definitely a legal speed for anybody paying attention.
With 6 minutes to spare.
To jump on this podcast with 6 minutes.
Okay. All right. So we're going to, so we also get introduced this connection between dwarves and treasure. Dwarves are often kind of treasure controllers.
Yeah.
On some level.
The stereotypes about dwarves in Old Norse, and really it's like Old Norse plus like ancient, Western German. But the stereotypes about dwarves, that they are excellent smiths, especially of swords, is true. And this is an old stereotype about elves and dwarves that goes way back. So that, you know, weapons forged by elves or forged by dwarves, you know, the arrowheads and you know, axes and swords and things like this, they're not just magical in some way, they're poisoned. And usually the particular kind of poison is that whatever wound is made by an elf weapon or a dwarf weapon, whatever wound is made by that doesn't heal. Or sometimes a sword that's forged by the dwarves cannot be sheathed. Once it's drawn, it cannot be sheathed again until it has spilled blood, which means if you don't have an enemy about and you draw your sword recklessly, you end up killing your brother. You know, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Also, we get the cursed gold, or as it would be put in older English, glamored gold. This is the real meaning of glamour everywhere. By the way, everybody. So if you're getting glamour shots, just think about that. You're basically getting cursed photography. So just putting that out there. So, all right, we're going to continue on. I'm going to read this next section, and this will finish up Otter's ransom. Now the gods rode with the treasure to Hridmar and fulfilled the otter skin and set it on its feet, and they must cover it over utterly with gold. But when this was done, then Hridmar came forth and beheld yet one of the muzzle hairs and bade them cover that withal. In other words, there's a whisker sticking out that was not covered with gold, and bade them cover that withal. Then Odin drew the ring, Andvari's loom, from his hand and covered up the hair therewith. Then sang Loki, gold enow. Now enow here is enough in just in older English. Gold enow, a great wergild thou hast, that my head and good hap I may hold, but thou and thy son are not fated to thrive. The bane shall it be of you both. In other words, Loki is basically saying here that I'm handing the curse over to you, right? Thereafter, says Regin, Fáfnir slew his father and murdered him, nor got I aught of the treasure, and so evil he grew, that he fell to lying abroad, and begrudged any share in the wealth to any man, and so became the worst of all worms, and ever now lies brooding upon that treasure. But for me, I went to the king and became his master smith. And thus is the tale told of how I lost the heritage of my father and the wergild for my brother. And just a reminder here, wergild is the money that you pay because you killed someone. Basically, it's
which Hridmar had demanded from the gods.
From the gods,
you see, even the gods are bound by the wergild. He demanded the wergild from the gods for the death of his son, because of course some of Hryvik's children are otter than others.
Thanks. So spake Regin. But since that time, gold is called Ottergild, and for no other cause than this. We'll mention that in just a second. It's really important, that thing that's just said there. But Sigurd answered, much hast thou lost, and exceeding evil have thy kinsmen been. But now make a sword by thy craft, such a sword as that none can be made like unto it, so that I may do great deeds therewith, if my heart avail thereto, and thou wouldst have me slay this mighty dragon. Regin says, trust me well herein, and with that same sword shalt thou slay Fáfnir. Okay, William Morris translates this as Ottergild, sometimes translated as Otter's ransom. This is one of the things that's pointed out by Snorri Sturluson in his Prose Edda, as I recall correctly. This is one of the kennings, one of these sort of like brief sayings that stands in for something else and is used in skaldic poetry, right? So there's two big ones that refer to gold that you might that are notable, particularly. So Ottergild or Otter's ransom. So if someone says in a piece of poetry, you know, and I received Otter's ransom, and all that means is I got gold, because everyone knows this story, and so they know Otter's ransom is gold, or Ottergild, right? It is gold. So it's a stand-in for gold. The other one that's referenced is Sif's hair, is another big one that's a stand-in for gold. And this is why the Marvel Cinematic Universe got the Sif character wrong. I mean, played well in the movies.
also supposed to be married to Thor, but anyway.
That's right. That's right. But in the movies, they have her as a brunette. I mean, which she's lovely, whatever. But like, no, Sif must be golden haired because Sif's hair is one of these kennings that stands in for.
Well, while we're on this subject, Father Andrew, I mean, I wasn't going to use precious time ranting about this, but since you've opened the door, Thor is supposed to be a red-haired farmer, dude.
That's right.
He should be brawny. Thor should not have a six-pack. He should have a beer belly and red hair.
Well, he does in that one movie.
He does in that one movie, and everybody hated it for justly, but I guess, but anyway, Thor should have red hair. I'll die on this hill. But in any case, the other kenning for gold, which comes directly from the story, which will be very important, is Grani's burden. But we'll talk about that.
Grani's burden.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So yes, okay. So here we've got some of the backstory. Where did the horde come from? Where does Fáfnir come from? All of this kind of stuff. And this gets the ball rolling for this curse.
Yeah.
Right. It starts out with Loki throwing a rock at an otter who's really a dude, or he's a dude that is an otter also, because he wanted to.
Just be like a little careful when you're out, just like shooting random animals.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so let's head on into chapter 15, and why don't you go ahead and read this one for us, and you'll read the whole chapter.
Yep. All right. So Regin makes a sword and gives it into Sigurd's hands, and he takes the anvil and says, "Behold thy smithying, Regin," and therewith smote it into the anvil, and the sword brake. So he cast down the brand and bade him forge a better. Then Regin forged another sword and brought it to Sigurd, who looked thereon and said, Regin, belike thou art well content therewith, hard master though thou be in smithying. So Sigurd proved the sword and brake it even as the first. Then he said to Regin, art thou mayhappen a traitor and a liar like to those former kin of thine? Therewith he went to his mother, and she welcomed him in seemly wise, and they talked and drank together. Then spake Sigurd, Have I heard aright that King Sigmund gave thee the good sword Gram in 2 pieces? Gram is the family sword of the Völsungs. So Sigurd, true enough, she said. So Sigurd said, Deliver them into my hands, for I would have them. She said he looked like to win great fame, and gave him the sword. Therewith went Sigurd to Regin, and bade him to make a good sword thereof as best he might. Regin grew wroth thereat, but went into the smithy with the pieces of the sword, thinking well, meanwhile, that Sigurd pushed his head far into the matter of smithying. So he made a sword. As he bore it forth from the forge, it seemed to the smiths as though fire burned along the edges thereof.
That's cool.
Now he bade Sigurd take the sword, and he said he knew not how to make a sword of if this one failed. Then Sigurd smote into the anvil and cleft it down to the stock thereof, and neither burst the sword nor brake it. Then he praised the sword much, and thereafter went to the river with a lock of wool, and threw it up against the stream, and it fell asunder when it met the sword, which basically, for that to work, it's got to be incredibly sharp. Then was Sigurd glad, and went home. But Regin said, Now whereas I have made the sword for thee, belike thou wilt hold to thy troth given, and wilt go to meet Fáfnir? Surely will I hold thereto, said Sigurd, yet first I must avenge my father. Now Sigurd, the older he grew, the more he grew in the love of all men, so that every child loved him well. So this is a really evocative scene, and it's one that gets honorable mention in Tolkien's On Fairy Tales when he talks about the way that fairy tales help us recover kind of the basic building blocks of creation. He says, in the forging of Gram, cold iron was revealed. And obviously, you can draw some kind of direct parallel from this to the blade that was broken, Narsil and Durul in The Lord of the Rings. Yeah. You're certainly meant to think of it in that way, I think. There's maybe also a link to this. You'll remember that when Turin, when he goes to war, his sword, the Mormisil, the black sword, what was it called? Oh my gosh. Sorry, guys, I've got a cold.
I wrote a whole paper about this sword.
Yeah. Anyway, the sword.
I can't think of it now. Yeah.
Anglical.
That's right.
Anglical. Yeah. So this sword is reforged. It's noted that it's reforged in the Silmarillion before he goes to war. Now, this is before it's broken, when he, kills the dragon, then kills himself at the end of the story. But it's noted that it's reforged. And it's not because the weapon has broken in the story, but it's forged anew when he goes to war. And that seems to be connected to the story in my mind in some way. So anyway, it's a cool moment. In the ring cycle, if I remember correctly, Regin is trying to reforge Graham, but it doesn't work because ultimately to reforge the sword, you have to be completely without fear. Which Regin is not, but Siegfried is, and so he is able to reforge the sword in the ring cycle, which is also quite cool, but not what you find here in the saga. So
yeah, well, and I mean, think about also what this is one of these moments that I would love to have, Jonathan Pajot with us. Like, what is the symbolism of a reforged sword? I mean, there's a bunch of things you could say about this. As you mentioned, this is the family sword. This is Graham, the family sword. This is the power of his people, but it's broken. It's been broken. And so, for fans of Aragorn, who also carries a reforged, broken sword, this is the return of the king, right? This is the king coming into his own. This is the hero finally arriving. Right. And like, notice in this scene where he goes and talks to his mother. So this is this connection back with family. His mother, it says that his mother sees that he's going to do great deeds. And so she gives him the shards of the sword. And I think it's interesting and notable that it's with his mother. So it's this kind of, there's womb imagery. There's all of that. Like, it's hidden for a while and now it's going to be brought out. I think there's all kinds of cool stuff going on here with the recovery of this sword and the reforging of the sword. I love the detail where it says that it looks like there's fire on the rim. That's just kind of a neat, cool thing,
A little bit of the background for the sword is that after the Völsungs, after Völsung builds the great hall of around the massive oak tree Bornstock, Odin shows up one day and he thrusts this blade, Graham, into the tree. And he says, whoever draws the sword that will be the true king of England. Wait, no, sorry. He says, whoever draws this sword shall possess a better gift than any that they have had before. So everybody comes and tries and it doesn't work. And then, of course, Sigmund, who's Sigurd or Siegfried's father, he comes and he draws the sword from the tree effortlessly, which establishes his role as being the great hero of his generation. So, Sigmund goes through exile, he goes into battle, he has his final confrontation with the sons of Hunding, and in this climactic moment, Odin appears on the battlefield. And, to Sigmund, he's just this old man with a spear. And so he raises his sword to strike, and Odin raises his spear and, of course, shatters the blade in two. And so as Sigmund is dying, he instructs Hjordis, his wife, to save the fragments and prophesies that they will be reforged into for their as yet unborn son. So that's kind of this part of the story serves, symbolically a lot of things. One is a motif that's sometimes called heroic testing. That is, something's got to be done 3 times for it to be done correctly, and you want for the kinds of things that Sigurd is going to do. Sigurd is going to go and be basically the Achilles of the North. He's going to be the great hero of his people. So his sword has to be the best sword, right? Which means that ultimately only a sword that has come to him from Odin, who is of course his distant ancestor. Although lots of us are descended from Odin, Sigurd's not special. But On my mother's side, I'm descended from Balder the Beautiful. So have to,
through my great grandmother, I'm descended from Valand.
See,
Roland,
yes,
Wayland.
yeah,
So
yeah. So anyway, like I said, lots of us descended from Odin at this point, but of course Sigurd is special.
Yes.
And there's just also, there's a deep symbolism in the idea of the family sword, the sword that's passed down from father to son. What it means for the sword to be broken, a sword being not to put too fine a point on it, but a patriarchal symbol, let's say.
Sure.
It's and
I mean, this is going to lead into questions
Yes.
about possible fertility, whatever. So
exactly,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And that's again probably also the etymological pun in the even the name of the Völsungs is related to that. So the idea is that when your sword is broken, your family is cut off. Your male line is broken. Obviously, other than his incestuous son Sinfjotli, Sigmund doesn't have any heirs, and Sinfjotli I think is dead by this point. And so anyway, his line is cut off, but also not totally. Why? Because there's a seed under the earth waiting to blossom, and in this case, it's Sigurd himself, who is still in his mother's womb at this moment.
Yeah.
So he's born, and when he's born, the sword is reforged. And when that sword is reforged, that's when he's able to go on and slay the dragon. And so if you think about these things, and you think about some of the themes of Christmas, right? A root of Jesse, life springing forth from a barren field, all these different things, and then, Christ as a dragon slayer. If you think about those themes, you start to understand more why maybe it seemed kind of natural to put these kinds of images on doors and in other kind of liminal spaces around churches in medieval Norway.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to move on to chapter 16. This one's really, really short, but I think I don't know. I don't quite know what to think about this. I have questions, so I'll be interested to know what you might have to say about this. This one's really struck me as kind of a weird, it seems like an insertion, but I think it's probably not. Anyway, here we go. There was a man named Grifir, although in some texts it's Gripir with a P, who was Sigurd's mother's brother, so his uncle. And a little after the forging of the sword, Sigurd went to Grifir because he was a man who knew things to come and what was fated to men. Of him, Sigurd asked diligently how his life should go, but Grifir was long ere he spake, yet at the last, by reason of Sigurd's exceeding great prayers, in other words, he kept asking him, he told him all his life and the fate thereof, even as afterwards came to pass. So when Grifir had told him all, even as he would, he went back home, and a little after he and Regin met. Then said Regin, Go thou and slay Fáfnir, even as thou hast given thy word. Sigurd said, That work shall be wrought, but another is first to be done, the avenging of Sigmund the king, and the other of my kinsmen, who fell in that their last fight. So he goes to Grifir, who is this soothsayer, this an oracle of sorts. He can see things, and it says that he tells him his whole life, his whole fate, and it says as it came to pass. So like he's not lying. So what is this about? Why does he want to know the future? I mean, obviously there's a certain, like when you're about to go into battle, there's usually often like this oracular thing that people do in a lot of pagan stories. So I get that. And then there's also this question, we'll see more later why this is, like what does he actually learn? Because the question of what Sigurd knows and when will come up again in just a minute, as we're going to be discussing this. So what is this doing here? What's the deal with going to the fortune teller? I don't get this actually. Except for like, I know that again, this sort of consulting an oracle before you go to battle, sure, but it seems weird with what else is about to happen that this should be in here.
Yeah. So the reason this is here is because it's one of the oldest poems that the saga is based on.
Okay.
I think it's in the Poetic Edda. But it's certainly the Codex Regius. It follows the poem in there about Sinfjoti, Sinfjota, who's Sigmund's other son. It's been a while since I've read it, but basically the whole point, it's not an insertion, it's a necessary part of the story that everybody would have already known was part of the story, because it's a poem. It's a poem.
Right.
The original story as it survives. So let me back up a little bit. For folks, I'm just trying to be. We have a hard stop today at I think, is that right?
Actually, I'm okay.
Right.
We were going to have a hard stop, but my plans have changed, so we're all right.
Okay, all right. So when Tolkien writes the Lay of Sigurd and Gudrun, he is actually trying to solve a particular philological problem, which is that there was a longer Lay of Sigurd and a shorter Lay of Sigurd, and only the shorter Lay of Sigurd, which is actually quite long, survives to us, and it's part of the Codex Regius. The longer Lay of Sigurd is kind of lost, but there are all these other poems that seem to have either been part of it or are related to it. And so most of the poetry of the material that makes its way into the Völsungasaga is, that's the actual story that people know. So when the Völsungasaga is written, it's and the other like prose narrative forms of this are written, Thiethric Saga and so on. When these sagas are written, they are treating from this vast body of material, but they're not creating it. Nobody's inventing a story, and nobody's sitting down trying to write a story the way that I would try to sit down and write a story. Like if I were just trying to write a novel and be like, all right, I got to think about my 3-act structure, and I got to think about. Everybody already knows the story of the Völsungs. So if you leave something out, people are going to be like, hey, why'd you leave that important part of the story out?
Yeah. Okay.
So when he goes to see Gripir, which really just means grip, that's his name. When he goes to see him, he basically asks him, how are things going to go for me? How's my life going to go? What are the things, what's my fortune going to be? And I do have a bit of the poem pulled up here, which I will read. Great. Just so you can get a sense of the actual exchange. We'll look more in more detail at some excerpts from the original poetry next time. Völsungasaga is actually kind of a Johnny-come-lately on the scene of this material, which is crazy to think about, where you're like, oh yes, the most famous version of the story actually comes from the 13th century. It's not even the best or oldest one, because the best and oldest stuff is the poetry, but you have to have like a certain kind of appetite for that. So Sigurd goes to see him, and then Getir went. Getir is like his Gripir's door warden. Then Getir went, and to Gripir spake, a stranger comes and stands without. Lofty he is to look upon, and prince thyself he fain would see. From the hall the ruler of heroes went, and greeted well the warrior come. Sigurd, welcome, long since had been thine. Now, Getir, thou shalt Grani take. So Grani is the horse. Then of many things they talked, which you'll notice he already has in this version of the story. Then of many things they talked, when thus the men so wise had met. Sigurd spake, to me, if thou knowest, my mother's brother, say what life will Sigurd's be. Gripir spake, of men thou shalt be on earth the mightiest, and higher famed than all the heroes, free of gold giving, slow to flee, noble to see, and sage in speech. Okay, so far so good. But you say this to all the girls. Sigurd spake, monarch wise, now more I ask, to Sigurd say, if thou thinkest to see, what first will chance of my fortune fair, when hence I go from out thy home. Gripir spake, first shalt thou, prince, thy father avenge, and Eilimi their ills requiting. The hardy sons of Hunding thou shalt soon fell, and victory find. So the first thing he's got to do is go and avenge his father.
Which is what he's already headed to do anyway.
Yes. So, Sigurd spake, Noble king, my kinsman, say thy meaning true, for our minds we speak. For Sigurd mighty deeds doth see, the highest beneath the heavens all? What other mighty things am I going to do? Gripir spake, the fiery dragon alone thou shalt fight, that greedy lies at Nichteheth. Thou shalt be of Regin and Fáfnir both the slayer. Truth doth Gripir tell thee. Sigurd spake, rich shall I be if battles I win with such as these, as thou now sayest. Forward look and further tell what the life that I shall lead. Fáfnir's den, Gripir spake, Fáfnir's den then shalt thou find, and all his treasure fair shall take, gold shall heap on Grani's back, unproved in fight, to Giuki fair.
This is stuff that we're not going to be covering today.
Yes.
What he's talking about now.
Sigurd spake to the warrior now in words so wise, monarch noble more shall tell. I am Giuki's guest, and thence I go, what life that I shall lead. Gripir spake, on the rocks there sleeps the ruler's daughter, fair in armor. Since Helgi fell, thou shalt cut with keen-edged sword and cleave the Byrni with Fafnir's killers. So it's, by the way, this is interesting. It seems like this particular poet does not associate the Valkyrie with Brynhild. They're two different people at this point. Excuse me. Remember I said that there's a kind of merger of characters into the figure of Brynhild and the figure of Sigurd, which we'll talk about next time. But this is an example of that. The really early stuff, there's kind of two different figures. Sigurd spake, the male coat is broken, the maiden speaks, the woman who from sleep has wakened. What says the maid to Sigurd then, that happy fate to the hero brings? Gripnir spake, runes to the warrior will she tell, all that men may ever seek, and teach thee to speak in all men's tongues, and life with health, thou art happy king. Sigurd spake, now it is ended, the knowledge is won, and ready am I forth thence to ride. Forward look, and further tell, what the life that I shall lead. Gripir spake, then to Hamer's home thou comest, and glad shall be the guest of the king. Ended, Sigurd, is all I see. No further aught of Gripir ask. So he basically says, oh no, don't worry about it. It's gonna be very happy, everything's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. You should stop asking. And Sigurd says, sorrow brings me the word thou sayest, for monarch forward, further thou seest. Sad the grief for Sigurd thou knowest, yet not to me, Gripir, known wilt make. Gripir spake, before me lay, in clearest light, all of thy youth for mine eyes to see. Not rightly can I wise be called, not forward-seeing. My wisdom is fled. No man, Gripir, on earth I know, who sees the future as far as thou. Hide thou not, though hard it be, and base the deeds that I shall do. Gripir spake, with baseness never thy life is burdened. Hero noble, hold that sure. Lofty as long as the world shall live, battle-bringer thy name shall be. Sigurd spake, naught could seem worse, but now must part the prince and Sigurd, since so it is. My road I ask, the future lies open. Mighty ones, speak, my mother's brother. Gripir spake, now to Sigurd all shall I say, for to this the warrior bends my will. Thou knowest well that I will not lie. A day there is when thy death is doomed. Sigurd spake, no scorn I know for the noble king, but counsel good from Gripir I seek. Well will I know, though evil awaits, what Sigurd may before him see. And then, I mean, the poem goes on for quite a bit longer, but basically what he tells him is, in Hymir's home, there's a woman named Brynhild. She's very beautiful, she's very fearless, and she's going to rob you of all joy. You will not find sleep, your fuse will not end, all these.
She's the one
things.
for you, buddy.
And Sigurd is like, okay, so could I buy, like, sounds like she's bad news, but maybe, I can buy her with the marriage price. And Gripir says, yet twain shall all the oaths then swear that bind full fast, few shall ye keep. One night when Yuki's guest thou hast been, will Hymir's fosterling fade from thy mind. So basically tells him everything that's going to happen. He's going to be tricked. He's going to be tricked by Grimhild's wiles, all the things, the whole love kind of triangle that I mentioned, all that stuff is going to happen. And he's warned about basically all of it. And
that's the thing that gets me. Like, there's a couple moments. There's a moment we're about to read where it seems like he doesn't remember what Gripir told him.
Well, he will get magical amnesia at one point, but the thing that's important is that the way that this ends, the final exchange in this poem is quite important to understand how they thought about this kind of fate. If this was a Greek tragedy, which we've done a lot of this year or last year, oh boy, I gotta make that transition. If this is a Greek tragedy, which we did a lot of last year, as soon as somebody tells you your fate, you go about trying to avoid it.
Yes.
Well, that might be fine for those Greeks lying around eating grape leaves and drinking, wine. But in the frozen north where men are men, this is the idea. In the frozen
all of our
north,
fans from last year are quitting this podcast.
Yeah.
Throwing their phones against the wall.
Come on, I love Greek food. But the idea in the frozen north is that when somebody tells you your fate, do you try to change it? Well, here's what Sigurd says: "Now fare thee well, our fates we shun not." And well has Gripir answered my wish. More of joy to me wouldst tell of my life to come, if so thou couldst. And then there's the end is Gripir spake. Ever remember, ruler of men, that fortune lies in the hero's life. A nobler man shall never live beneath the sun than Sigurd shall seem. So what he's saying is,
it's kind of Achilles-ish.
Yeah, he's saying is like, okay, yes, this is how your life is going to eventually end. And but by the way, Sigurd knows that his murder is going to be avenged, so he's not worried about it. That's part of the prophecy. Like, as long as but he's basically saying, yes, this is the whole thing. There's going to be magic. There's going to be beautiful women. You're going to be tricked. You're going to forget all these things. You're going to be murdered, but then your murder will be avenged. All these things, but nobody will ever be more glorious than you as a hero. Yeah. And Sigurd says, I can live with that. Yeah. And then he goes on.
I can die with that.
Meet his fate and not shun it, which is what a hero does in this kind of story. Yeah. Okay. So that's what that little chapter is about. Every single one of these chapters, though, sections, chapters, whatever you want to call it, you have to think of is originally a poem or a section of a poem. Yeah. Which, by the way, is how the Silmarillion was originally conceived. Sure. And more's the pity that was not finished. But.
Okay, so in the next chapter or section, whatever, we are going to skip this one. But you should just know that he basically goes and avenges his father, and it says that he hews both man and horse. The reason why we're skipping it is because while this is an important element of the Sigurd story, it's not directly germane to the Fáfnir story. So we can definitely come back to it at some point, but I just want to kind of move on to this. So, okay, so the next one now, we're back to the main action. So why don't you go ahead and, this is actually the longest section that we're going to read today. So why don't you read the beginning of this?
Now Sigurd and Regin ride up on the heath along that same way wherein Fáfnir was wont to creep when he fared to the water. And folk say that 30 fathoms was the height of that cliff along which he lay when he drank of the water below. Then Sigurd spake, And how sayest thou, Regin, that this drake was no greater than other lingworms? Methinks the track of him is marvellous great. Then, Regin, make thee a hole, and sit down therein, and whenas the worm comes to the water, smite him into the heart, and do so, and so do him to death, and win thee great fame thereby. But Sigurd said, "What will betide me if I be before the blood of the worm?" Says Regin, "Of what avail to counsel thee, if thou art still afeard of everything? Little art thou like thy kin in stoutness of heart." Then Sigurd rides right over the heath, but Regin gets him gone, sore afeard. But Sigurd fell to digging him a pit, and whilst he was at the work, there came to him an old man with a long beard, and asked him what he wrote there. And he told him. Then answered the man and said, "Thou dost after sorry counsel. Rather dig thee many pits, and let the blood run therein, but sit thee down in one thereof, and so thrust the worm's heart through." So basically the idea is Regin wants all of the blood to come down into one pit, which is going to basically burn and drown Sigurd.
Yeah,
right.
And that was the complaint that Sigurd had.
Yes.
Is like, what happens if the blood gets on me, basically?
Yes, or like all of it gets on me. And
there's
so
this
the good
irony. I was just saying, there's an irony here where Regin is saying, like, "What, are you afraid?" And literally, he's the guy who's running off afraid. Yeah.
Sigurd is not afraid. He was just trying to be a little prudent. And fortunately, some old man with a long beard, who could this be?
Who could it be?
And asks him what is wrong. Yeah. So therewith he but sit thee down in one thereof, and so thrust the worm's heart through, and therewithal he vanished away. But Sigurd made the pits even as it was shown to him. Now crept the worm down to his place of watering, and the earth shook all about him, and he snorted forth venom all the way before him as he went. But Sigurd neither trembled nor was adrad, that is, afraid, at the roaring of him, adread, the roaring of him. So, whenas the worm crept over the pits, Sigurd thrust his sword under his left shoulder, so that it sank up into the hilts, and then up leapt Sigurd from the pit, and drew the sword back unto him, and therewith was the arm all bloody, up to the very shoulder. I will say, when you kill very, very large animals with a bladed weapon, there is a sort of like, you can sort of feel the pop as you pierce the aorta. And I've always wondered, did Sigurd feel that here?
I'm guessing so. Yeah, this is one of the things that's kind of notable is, like, if this were a modern story, there would be a back and forth between the hero and the dragon. Like, there would be twists and turns and, bloodying on both sides and so on and so forth. But that is not how it goes here. It's basically he lies in wait, dragon comes, boom, death blow. Which honestly is much better for a hero just trying to kill a dragon, but is not a very action movie kind of thing to do.
Yeah, but cunning is something that people really valued in the ancient world. Like it's a matter of survival.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not a symmetrical battle. This is a dragon versus a dude. Okay, so I wanted to pause here because this is when we actually finally meet the dragon in the story, and ask the question, what is the purpose of a dragon in a story? And this was a question that was approached by our good friend J.R.R. Tolkien in a lecture that he gave, which is simply titled On Dragons, which he gave just a few months after The Hobbit came out. He gave it in January, actually right around this time of year, at a museum to children. And if you want to read this essay, it's hard to get hold of. This lecture, but there is a special edition of The Hobbit that was put out, an anniversary edition a few years ago, which came with like a little extra booklet that was edited by Hammond and Skull, and it includes this lecture in it, and which I happen to have a copy of it. I know you have a copy of it. We both read it, and the thing that he says dragons are for, and is really important to note, is that a dragon exists within a story. Questions about dragons as big, powerful beasts are not the point in stories like this. The point is that the dragon serves a function within the story. And he says, ultimately, the purpose of a dragon in any traditional story is to prove the hero. That's the point. That this dragon exists for Sigurd. And he says that the thing that all the stories tell about dragons is about their overthrow. Not just that they're big and scary and can eat people and breathe fire, but the whole point is that they're overthrown. And I mean, that is the arc in the Bible too. Like Leviathan ultimately is overthrown by God. So I think it's really important to point that out here, that Fáfnir is not just like the dragon guarding the gold. The point is he's part of Sigurd's story, and that is what's going on here. To treat him like he's sort of a big medieval tank or something like that sort of misses the point. And at one point, like when Tolkien is talking about like the dragon and Beowulf, he essentially says, why is it that it's not a huge pile of warriors that all go and fight the dragon together? And he says, well, if they did that, then the dragon would have to be bigger and bigger, because a dragon is always the insurmountable thing in the room.
Yeah.
And by just piling up warriors against it, then you are turning it into a military problem and not into a story problem, right? Within the story, he's there to prove the hero. And if he's not more powerful than the hero, then what is he doing there? You know, if he's just something that the hero can take on, no problem, then it's, the hero is just basically hunting for lunch. He's not slaying a dragon. So that's part of what's going on here is this moment shows you what kind of man Sigurd is, that he's able to defeat this dragon. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that there's a detail that the dragon comes down to drink water, and you could probably say a lot about this. There's a strong association of dragons with water. Of course, in Greek mythology, you've got the Hydra. In the Bible, you've got Leviathan. And of course, elsewhere in Norse mythology, you have Jormungandr, who's down there, under the ocean. What is the deal, just briefly, with dragons and water?
So dragons originally are monsters which guard sources of fresh water, which in an agrarian culture, especially like, in the Levant or even parts of, Greece, Mesopotamia, so on, a dragon is a creature that guards water. So you have to defeat the dragon in order to gain access to the water, which is going to then, irrigate your land, feed your crops, let you build your city, and so on. So the dragon is the monster which has to be defeated so the city can be built. And the dragon has the thing, and this is, of course, there's the most famous dragon slaying story in Indian mythology, as in the Indian subcontinent. Same kind of a thing. Like the dragon has to be defeated so that you are so that society can be founded, so civilization can be founded. Well, it seems like what happens then as you get to the late Iron Age is that the thing that's become the most important now for cities for human society to cohere is not fresh water, although obviously fresh water is always important, but it's, hold on, I got another sneeze coming. So hard to talk
this
when
is
you're
like
fighting
Leviathan.
a sneeze.
You're sneezing fire.
Oh, it's so hard to talk when you're fighting a sneeze. All right, so the most important thing is not fresh water, it's gold. And you need gold. So, for instance, the dragon in Aesop's Fables is probably the first example of a dragon that hoards gold instead of water or instead of something else. You can also understand then the symbolism of like a dragon going after a young maiden, going after virgins, things like this. Again, the whole idea is like, here's the thing that you need, to what, you need young, fertile, noble women. Like that's why they're always princesses, like here's the thing that you need for.
St. Basil mentions dragons and gold in the text that we talked about in the very first episode of this podcast. Right. Like this is an ancient idea.
Yeah. So it's at some point in the Iron Age, it shifts from water to gold, but then the Scandinavian stories pick that up, really beginning with this one. This is the original northern dragon slaying tale, and we talked about this a little bit in the Beowulf episodes we did, I think, and certainly. If anybody wants to hear me talk about Beowulf for like 18 hours, we have a whole class in the course that I did for Symbolic World on Beowulf.
Longer than the ring cycle.
Longer than the ring cycle. We have a whole course in there on dragon slaying, and dragon slaying as the original Indo-European myth. But in any case, gold is now the thing that you need. And so where does the gold come from? Well, the gold comes from as a result of Weregild. So where the whole idea of the wergild is, because you're giving me this gold, I will not enter into a feud with you. So the purpose of the gold is to placate, it's to make atonement, it's to restore a relationship, or at least make a relationship possible where previous acts of violence would have made it impossible. But then what happens so often in so many cases, and this is of course one of the things the story is about, is that you pay the guy off, but then he starts to say, I wonder if you've got it. I wonder if he just gave me all this wergild. I wonder if he has more. I wonder if I could get it for myself, Yeah. And so you pay the Danegeld, and then the Dane comes back, right?
That's right.
So you have this a source of gold. Well, the thing it's supposed to do is make up for the loss of that member of the community. That's the whole point of the wergild. By the way, wergild is not just for killings. If you Anglo-Saxon law, just for instance, or old Icelandic law as well, had prices associated for various kinds of accidents. So let's say you're out working, or watching some guy's sheep, and while you're on his property, while you're watching his sheep, you lose a hand or you lose an eye, something like that. Well, instead of, that in that culture, like losing a hand, I mean, it's a huge deal now, but it was an even bigger deal back then. Your ability to fight, your ability to farm, to do all the things that, really mainly fighting and farming that you need to do to be a productive member of the society, you're not able to really do effectively anymore. So what you need is, you need some compensation for that, but it also has to be not so much that it's punitive. So the part of the point of the wergild system was that it was trying to actually set a limit for how much you could ask back for something. Now, in the case of magical otter boys and gods and things like that, I don't know exactly what system they were going by. The point is, it's enough gold to fill an otter skin, or a were otter skin, or a dwarf otter skin. It's enough gold to fill that skin and also cover it on the outside, right? So it's a lot of gold, but we're not talking like Smaug's mound in The Hobbit, it's enough gold you can carry it away on a horse.
Yeah.
But the point is, the gold is supposed to cover the loss of that person in the society. But then what happens with Fáfnir? Well, Fáfnir decides, actually, I would like to keep all of this for myself, and so I'm going to now kill my father. I'm going to run my other brother out. I'm going to take the gold, and I'm going to just keep it for myself. So this thing that is supposed to be the source of reintegration and communion becomes, because of the curse that is on it, and because of greed, it becomes, the source of dragonish brooding. And in Old Norse stories, and I would also venture to say in Old English stories, you are not born a dragon. Dragons don't hatch from eggs.
Yeah.
Dragons are made, and they are made by sitting, as Eustace Scrubb learned, on a hoard and thinking dragonish thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I think that is really evocative here is there's so much of what you just said that can map onto the harrowing of hell. That in this sense, the souls of mankind are the treasure that's being sort of sat upon by the devil, and that Christ the hero goes in and slays the dragon, and then the saints are brought out, and they become the lifeblood in so many ways, along with his own blood, right, of the church. Like, they are now what helps to this civilization that is the church to go. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can interpret this that are wonderfully Christian. But yeah, we should probably get moving on here. Okay, so continuing on. Now, when that mighty worm was ware that he had his death wound, then he lashed out head and tail, so that all things soever that were before him were broken to pieces. So when as Fáfnir had his death wound, he asked, Who art thou, and who is thy father, and what thy kin, that thou wert so hardy as to bear weapons against me? Sigurd answered, Unknown to men is my kin. I am called a noble beast. Neither father have I nor mother, and all alone have I fared hither. I mean, there is a way in which you could interpret that as Christological. Fatherless on the side of his mother, motherless on the side of his father. As it's
or as we sang, Wednesday night in Vespers. It was that form, but I just noticed it this year because it was different from the usual form. But it was 8 days old on his mother's side and pre-eternal on his father's side.
Yes, yes, right, exactly.
Man, that's just a killer.
So cool. I know. These guys are good. Said Fáfnir, whereas thou hast neither father nor mother, of what wonder wert thou born then? But now, though thou tellest me not thy name on this my death day, yet thou knowest verily that thou liest unto me. He answered, Sigurd am I called, and my father was Sigmund.
Huge mistake.
Says, yeah, I never tell the dragon your name. Says Fáfnir, who egged thee on to this deed, and why wouldst thou be driven to it? Hadst thou never heard how that all folk were adread of me, and of the awe of my countenance? But an eager father thou hadst, O bright-eyed swain. Sigurd answered, a hearty heart urged me on hereto, and a strong hand, and this sharp sword, which well thou knowest now, stood me instead in the doing of the deed. And then he quotes a proverb, seldom hath hardy eld a faint heart youth, which means basically like father, like son. So if you know,
it's also the idea is the original in Fáfnismal, which I'll talk about in a moment. It goes like this: few are keen when old age comes, who timid in boyhood be. Yeah, so it's like. Yeah. It's like I'm a brave youth now, because if I'm not brave now, I'm not gonna, when I'm an old man, I'm not gonna be like this is the bravest I'm gonna get. Like I'm not gonna get more. Yeah.
Okay, Fáfnir said, "Well, I wot," which is a good old word meaning know or see or understand, more understand really. Well, I wot that hadst thou waxed amid thy kin, thou mightest have good skill to slay folk in thine anger. But more of a marvel is it that thou, a bondsman taken in war, shouldst have the heart to set on me, for few among bondsmen have heart for the fight. So basically Fáfnir is saying, well, if I knew that you had grown up as this great warrior or whatever amongst your kin, then that would make sense. But you're just a slave, buddy, who was taken in war. So he's just, trash talking him. Said Sigurd.
This is referring to the fact, by the way, that Hjordis, who is Sigurd, was... after Sigmund's death was captured, and so Sigmund grew up in captivity basically until he ran off to be fostered by Regan.
Yeah. So Fáfnir has heard of him. Said Sigurd, wilt thou then cast it in my teeth that I am far away from my kin? Albeit I was a bondsman, yet was I never shackled. God wot thou hast found me free enow. Fáfnir answered, in angry wise dost thou take my speech, but hearken, for that same gold which I have owned shall be thy bane too. Quoth Sigurd, fain would we keep all our wealth till that day of days, yet shall each man die once for all. So there's a bunch of stuff here, but just a couple of things that you should note that I think are kind of fun connections. Sigurd gives him this death wound, and then they have a whole chat. We're not done with the chat yet. That's going to be going. It's the same, the Silmarillion does the same thing. Turin has a conversation with Glaurung after he sticks him with his sword. In The Hobbit, there is a whole conversation with the dragon, but of course, Bilbo has not actually put a sword into him. But it's just sitting there having this conversation with the dragon. What's the deal with Sigurd not telling him his name? He knows you shouldn't tell a dragon your name, but then he comes out with it anyway.
Yeah, you have to start out being kind of cagey about it, but then he kind of, I don't know. You could say Fáfnir gets his goat. He gets. Well,
he is the goat,
and ultimately in this case, it's not. Yeah, ultimately in this case, it's not going to make a huge difference because the curse is on the gold. So, I don't think there's a sense in which my reading, anyways, is not that the curse wouldn't have been passed on if Sigurd hadn't introduced himself. But a chat with the dragon is a fairly stock part of an Old English or Old Norse dragon slaying story.
Yep.
It's not there in Beowulf, but you do before the fight in Beowulf. You get Beowulf sits down and gives a long kind of meditation on his life in Zed, and of course he's talking about fate and death, which is kind of what the dragon represents in that story.
Yeah. And we see, of course, here the glamored gold. So there's this curse that's coming. I mean, Sigurd knows all this based on his conversation with his uncle from earlier, but here it is now. It actually happened.
Now, in Fáfnir Small, which is the older poem that this part of the saga is based on, this is sometimes called like the lay or the ballad of Fáfnir, but it begins right after Fáfnir is dying, and large parts of the conversation are they're not copied here, but they're paraphrased kind of line for line in the Völsungasaga until you get to the middle section, which is quite long, which is Sigurd says, well, as long as I have you here and as long as you are dying, since you're so magical and you're so wise, I have a bunch of deep lore questions for you, like
right.
Who are the Norns?
Yes, that'll come up in a second here.
Who are they born from? What's the island called where the gods and Surt shall the sword sweat mingle? What's the, so ask questions about the nature of the world, the end of the world, and so on.
God bless you.
Sorry, it's a rough allergies day. Anyway, so the whole exchange is quite cool. We'll spend more time talking about Fáfnir next time.
So, okay, why don't you go ahead and read us this next section here.
All right, so what is that, 18?
Said Fáfnir, few things.
All right, said Fáfnir, few things wilt thou do after my counsel, but take heed that thou shalt be drowned if thou farest unwarily over the sea. So bide thou rather on the dry land for the coming of the calm tide. So that's quite useful, actually. Then said Sigurd, speak Fáfnir, and say, if thou art so exceeding wise, who are the Norns who rule the lot of all mothers' sons? Fáfnir answered, many there be, and wide apart, for some are of the kin of the Æsir, some are of elfin kin, and there are some who are daughters of Dvalin. Said Sigurd, how namest thou the holm whereon Surt and the Æsir will mix and mingle the water of the sword?
And holm, by the way, everybody, is an island.
Yes. Unshapen is that holm, height or called, said Fáfnir. And yet again he said, Regin, my brother has brought about my end, and it gladdens my heart that thine too he bringeth about, for thus will things be according to his will. And once again he spake, a countenance of terror I bore up before all folk, after I brooded over the heritage of my brother, and on every side did I spout poison, so that none durst come anigh me, and of no weapon was I adrad, nor ever had I so many men before me, as that I seemed myself not stronger than all, for all men were sore afeard of me. And Sigurd answered and said, few may have victory by means of that same countenance of terror, for whoso comes amongst many shall one day find that no man is by so far the mightiest of all. Then says Fáfnir, such counsel I give thee, that thou take thy horse and ride away at thy speediest, for oftentimes it falls out that he who gets a death wound avenges himself none the less. Sigurd answered, such as thy redes are, I will nowise do after them. Nay, I will not. I will ride now to thy lair, and take to me that great treasure of thy kin. Ride there then, said Fáfnir, and thou shalt find gold enow to suffice thee for all thy life days. Yet shall gold be thy bane, and the bane of every one soever who owns it. Then up stood Sigurd and said, home would I ride and lose all that wealth, if I deemed that by the losing thereof I should never die. But every brave and true man will fain have his hand on wealth till that last day. But thou, Fáfnir, wallow in the death pain, till death and hell have thee. And therewithal Fáfnir died. So he says, basically, I would be willing to pass on all the wealth if I could avoid death. Because Fáfnir basically says, well, yeah, go get the gold and enjoy it, but gold's going to be the death of you. And Sigurd says, well, I'm going to die anyway. And if I could trade it for immortality, I would. But since that's not an option on the table, I think I'd rather die rich than die poor. That's how Sigurd thinks about it.
Yeah. And the rest of this we kind of already discussed. So
yeah.
Moving on now to chapter 19, which I have given the title Regan Eats It. Because I thought that was funny. Thereafter came Regin to Sigurd and said, "Hail, Lord and Master, a noble victory hast thou won in the slaying of Fáfnir, whereas none durst heretofore abide in the path of him, and now shall this deed of fame be of renown while the world stands fast." Then stood Regin staring on the earth a long while, and presently thereafter spoke from heavy mood, "Mine own brother hast thou slain, and scarce may I be called sackless of the deed." Sackless means blameless. Then Sigurd took his sword Gram and dried it on the earth, and spake to Regin. I love those little details. "Afar thou faredst when I wrought this deed, and tried this sharp sword with the hand and the might of me. With all the might and main of a dragon must I strive, while thou wert laid alow in the heather bush, wotting not if it were earth or heaven." Said Regin, "Long might this worm have lain in his lair, if the sharp sword I forged with my hand had not been good at need to thee. Had that not been, neither thou nor any man would have prevailed against him as at this time." Sigurd answers, "When as men meet foes in fight, better is stout heart than sharp sword." Then said Regin exceeding heavily, "Thou hast slain my brother, and scarce may I be sackless of the deed." Therewith Sigurd cut out the heart of the worm with the sword called Ridil, but Regin drank of Fafnir's blood and spake, "Grant me a boon, and do a thing little for thee to do. Bear the heart to the fire and roast it, and give me thereof to eat." So they're going to eat the dragon, or at least Regin wants to eat the dragon. He's already drunk some of the blood. Okay. Blood drinking by itself in pagan contexts is very much a kind of power-up move. The whole point is to gain power. And the blood of a dragon, I mean, that's a big deal. It's kind of gross, though. This is his own brother, too. So all of this is going on here. But the whole point, like to eat the heart of the dragon, is to, gain this extra power, right? That's what's going on. So Regin is like, he's promised the gold to Sigurd, but he's saying, well, let me eat the dragon. So this is what he's getting out of it, right? That's at least what he's kind of saying. But it's kind of funny. He's said, well, the only reason you were able to kill him because I made you the sword, buddy. But of course, Sigurd's not going to accept that at all. He's like, look, I'm the one who killed him. I'm the one with the stout heart. The sword wouldn't have done anything if it weren't for for what I did. So, yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that? You want to just continue reading the next section here?
I think it's really helpful at this point to imagine Sigurd as being played by Dennis Quaid.
Okay.
Did you never see that? Did you never see that movie, Dragonheart?
Oh, I did see that movie, Dragonheart, but it's been a long time. I remember it not being that great.
If by that you mean it was the most amazing film of my entire childhood, then yes, you'd be right.
I wasn't there for your childhood.
It was so good. I love that movie so much. You're right. It's not a good movie, but I love it. I love it.
I think I was too old by that point.
Yeah. Dragonheart 2, though, big thumbs down. All right. Yeah, anyway, so
okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Wow. It's just like whenever I think about this passage, even though there's not like a, they're two totally different stories, but I just always think about that. So
how about Randy Quaid?
Get in the chat, Dragonheart kids. Nice. Get in the chat. Yeah, so I mean, eating the heart of the dragon, right, is a this is one of the most primal things in the entire, primal, ancient, fundamental. This is a sort of thing that in this story does not come from like the courtly stuff. It comes from something much older and probably scarier. Yeah.
Kind of deep magic, deep pagan magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Read on, Macduff.
Then Sigurd went his ways and roasted it on a rod, and when the blood bubbled out, he laid his finger thereon to assay it if it were fully done, as most of us do, when we're barbecuing a heart.
And since you pause, I should say that in the various wood carvings, of this story.
Scenes.
This is one of the scenes, is him sticking his thumb, and he's got his thumb in his mouth, because when he puts his thumb on it, it's hot, because of course he's burnt his finger a little bit.
Yeah, very realistic detail. And then he set his finger in his mouth, and lo, when the heart blood of the worm touched his tongue, straightway he knew the voice of all fowls, and heard withal how the woodpeckers chattered in the brake beside him. There sittest thou, Sigurd, roasting Fáfnir's heart for another, that thou shouldst eat thine own self, and then thou shouldst become the wisest of all men. That's my bird voice, in case you guys couldn't
Nice.
And another spake, There lies Regin, minded to beguile the man who trusts in him. But yet again, said the third, Let him smite the head from off him then, and be only lord of all that gold. And once more the fourth spake and said, the wiser were he if he followed after that good counsel, and rode thereafter to Fafnir's lair, and took to him that mighty treasure that lieth there, and then rode over to Hindfell, where sleeps Brynhild. Ooh! For there would he get great wisdom. Wise he were, if he did after your reeds, and bethought him of his own weal. For where the wolf's ears are, wolf's teeth are near. This is the Old Norse. That's how you say. That's the Old Norse version of where there's smoke, there's fire. By the way.
Oh, okay. Reeds, by the way, everybody, means counsels. That's an old word for counsels.
At last spake the sixth, handy and good rede to slay him and be lord of the treasure. Then said Sigurd, the time is unborn, wherein Regin shall be my bane. Nay, rather, one road shall both these brothers fare. And therewith he drew his sword Graham and struck off Regin's head.
Yeah. Well, we've already discussed like why he, what's this warning from the birds? Why does he need that if he already knows everything from his uncle and what Fáfnir said? But I think, as you said, though, this is sort of just the playing out of the fate. Right. Like, this is the way the story goes.
You also have to be told things 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, I often have to be told things 3 times.
Right. How much more, a character in a fairy tale, like
especially as I age. I haven't played my Gen X card in a while, so that's right. Pulling that one out there.
Yeah, you have to be told things 3 times. By the way, this is a very interesting scene to me. Jonathan and Pajot and I did a video about this a year or 2 ago on when we did our big dragons video, and there's this counsel that Christ gives to us, which is to be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But anybody who's ever spent any time raising birds, you're like, how harmless exactly? Like, what does that mean? And but I think that it is to some degree kind of associated with this. You have the so it's really interesting in this story. He eats the dragon's heart and he gets the wisdom of the serpent. Or he's already gotten the wisdom of the serpent by conversing with it, but now he also gets the wisdom of the birds, which is not harmless advice at all. I'm not saying this is how we should interpret Christ saying, I'm just, maybe not. Probably actually they're ravens, so that's an important detail.
Yeah, woodpeckers is what how William Morris translates it here.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the Old Norse, but usually when there's a battle on. It's the kind of birds who gather are ominous. Yeah. I have to see here.
Yeah. Now what we have here next, this is one of the insertions that William Morris made, where he took stuff out of other poetic texts and stuck it into his translation of the prose saga. And I don't want us to dwell on these because a lot of this is this is just kind of setting us up for the Brynhild story. Yeah. But I think it's worth putting this in here. I think that William Morris, he wanted us to see this coming. And so he put it into his translation of the saga.
And these are from the Fáfnir Small as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Because the whole idea here is that Sigurd might know somebody like Brynhild is coming, but one of the things that he gets here is, as part of the wisdom that he is given, is this knowledge of where's the most beautiful woman in the world. And in in the Völsungasaga, all of this is condensed in just a few words by one bird. But in the Fáfnir, there's actually a bird that talks about Brynhild and a bird that talks about Gudrun. But anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So, all right. Well, let's. I wanted to go ahead and read. Just go back and forth and read these real quick.
Sure.
And then we'll finish out the story.
Sounds good.
All right. Then heard Sigurd the woodpeckers a-singing, even as the song says. For the first sang, Bind thou, Sigurd, the bright red rings. Not meet it is many things to fear. A fair may know I, fair of all the fairest, girt about with gold, good for thy getting. Why don't you read and the second?
Green go the ways towards the hall of Giuki, that the fates show forth to those who fare thither. There the rich king reareth a daughter, this will be Gudrun. Thou shalt deal, Sigurd, with gold for thy sweetling.
And the third, a high hall is there, reared upon Hindfell. Without all around it sweeps the red flame aloft. Wise men wrought that wonder of halls with the unhidden gleam of the glory of gold.
Then the fourth sang, Soft on the fell a shield maiden sleepeth, the lime tree's red plague playing about her. The sleep thorn set Odin into that maiden for her choosing and wore the one he willed not. So I want everyone to think back to our Sleeping Beauty episode now. The thorn that he puts in her that puts her to sleep. Go, son, behold that may under helm whom from battle Vinskornir bore. From her may not turn the torment of sleep, dear offspring of kings in the dread Norns despite. So we set up nicely the wooing of Brynhild.
Yeah. We'll get to all of that. So I'm just going to read the last part now of our story for today. Then Sigurd ate some deal of Fáfnir's heart and the remnant. Then he leapt on his horse and rode along the trail of the wyrm Fáfnir, and so right unto his abiding place, and he found it open, and beheld all the doors, and the gear of them that they were wrought of iron, yea, and all the beams of the house, and it was dug down deep into the earth. There found Sigurd gold exceeding plenteous, and the sword Roti, and thence he took the helm of awe, and the gold Birni, and many things fair and good. So much gold he found there that he thought verily that scarce might 2 horses or 3 belike bear it thence. So he took all the gold and laid it in 2 great chests, and set them on the horse Grani, and took the reins of him, but no wise will he stir, neither will he abide smiting. Then Sigurd knows the mind of the horse, and leaps on the back of him, and smites, and spurs into him. And off the horse goes, even as if he were unladen. So this is, I just have to note, I thought it was interesting that he puts all the gold in 2 chests. Bilbo comes home with 2 chests of gold from another dragon slayer.
And of course, notice that there are now 3 magical named swords in this story. You have Graham and then Regan's sword, and now the sword Hroti, which is part of the Horde. But also there is something in here called the Dread Helm or the Fear Helm.
The Helm of Awe.
Which Helm of Awe, one might even venture a guess it may be related to the Dragon Helm of Hador.
Could be. I don't know.
Could be. I don't know.
So this is Sigurd getting all the stuff. These are the power-ups. This is the gold. This is the stuff that's going to make potentially him be able to be the founder of a family, of a civilization, something like that.
Yep.
It's not going to really work out so well, but
Yep.
He's got what he needs to do this. He has the kind of raw materials now to go off on the next stage of his quest. So let's take a brief look at the chat here. And it's been pretty active. Actually, it's been a lot of you hanging out. I think one of the highest numbers we've seen come and watch this show live. So
it's actually our biggest show this year.
What's that?
It's actually our biggest show this year. So
absolutely, it is our biggest show this whole year. Yeah. So early on, Sam Cooke asks, if you're a family in a pagan myth and you're not descended from at least one of the gods, are you actually important? I mean, yes. I mean, that's basically true. Like, the kind of underdog story, someone who comes from nothing and becomes important, is not a pagan story. Now, we should mention that this story is being told to us by Christians. This form of it is written down that way. But yes, this is a very, very old trope, that heroes are all descended from the gods in one way or another. And then he goes on to say, if they're descended from Odin, does that make them Nephilim? Not exactly, because that makes them demigods on some level. But I think within Norse and Germanic,
the Norse gods are barely gods. Like, for one thing, they're definitely not thinking of it along those lines. You could,
no, it's more like you have a really, really important ancestor. Is kind of the way it really comes down, and it's so watered down compared to the sort of classical pagan stuff and the ancient Near Eastern pagan stuff, that even Christian kings, for a long time, said that they were descended from.
Well, I mean,
Woden.
King Alfred the Great was descended from Woden, so
right. So obviously they don't have that strong sense of it. So,
but they would have also, these Christians would have thought of Odin as being an actual historical person with possible magical powers.
Sure. I mean, that's what Snorri Sturluson basically says at the beginning of the Prose Edda. Yeah. So Sundown Saturn asks the question, why do divine figures tend to show up as trickster figures? So obviously you're focusing Odin.
Good question to ask Jesus sometime if you meet him. I'm only a little bit.
No, there's a whole trope in the Church Fathers about a divine fishhook being used to capture the devil, like he's tricked into biting on something. I mean, St. John Chrysostom says hell took a body and met God. Surprise.
Surprise. Yeah, I mean, even in the interactions Christ has in the Gospels are very often kind of like these, like almost like a trickster figure, which it's going to sound blasphemous to some people, but I mean, just go read the Gospels, man. Like, the more I've been reading the Gospels, my entire life since I was 5 years old, and every time I read them, as the older I get, the more I read them, I feel like I understand them actually less, in the sense that I'm like, just even though I know the text, I know the story, I know what's going to happen next, everything Christ says is so just constantly surprising to me. So yep. That's what the divine. That's what it's like.
We got a super chat. I think that's what you call these things, from John Smoth 7130. I don't know if it's John's Moth or is it John's Moth?
John's Moth. John's Moth. Yeah, there's a guy named John. He's a very famous moth. I think that's the one that's being referred to here.
Okay. He gave us 10 Canadian dollars. And he says...
that's like $6 real.
No, it's a little bit more than that, I think. He says, I found both of you through Peugeot, saw Father Damick in Winnipeg last year with my wife. It got her open to Orthodoxy, and we have been attending Divine Liturgy for about 6 months now. Thank you both.
Glory to God.
It makes me so happy to hear that. John, thank you. That's very, very kind. And thanks for your kind donation to Ancient Faith Ministries. Yep. Guys, if you do a super chat with any of our shows here, with Great Tales, with stuff on my channel, with our Orthodox Pilgrim channel, all that stuff becomes a donation. It's a donation to Ancient Faith Ministries. So thank you very, very much for that.
And if you guys give enough, we can start buying Father Andrew a series of impressive hats. Which I tried to do in Scotland. I tried to get him a new hat. It was really worthy of his role as proto-presbyter of the ancient See of Antioch. But
I am indeed a proto-presbyter of the ancient.
He wouldn't let me do
Apostolic Patriarchate of Antioch.
That's right. So anyway, but yes, please, thank you. Please and thank you. Thanks so much for your donations. Lazarun Zalunir. I'm not sure how to say your last name.
He's our Icelandic
guy. Are we reading Heimskringla? Listen, the thing is, like, most of the books back here is Old Norse stuff. This is what I did my all my academic work on. This is what I've done all my academic publishing on.
What have I unleashed?
No actual, like, if this is on the table, I mean, this could just be the show. Like, there's no actual limit to the number of Old Norse things that we can do.
Yeah,
so
I mean, the truth is,
we are going to. The thing is that the Völsungasaga and that really, say, the material is a nice place to start because it's connected. It's all those old poems are very interconnected with one another. So I think that's what we'll do. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we both love, and you know way better than I, but we both love this literature. We could make this the whole podcast forever and ever. Amen.
Yeah.
We don't intend to do that, but be assured that this is always going to be one of our bigger playlists on the podcast. Yeah. So, man, there's so many good comments here. We can't really cover all of them.
Yeah.
I'll just highlight though. Sauli Lehtonen from Finland. I'll be chrismated into the Finnish Orthodox Church on theophany. 9 years ago, I got on the Peterson-Pajot pipeline. I'm 30 now. Long time coming, but I know I'm home. Thanks for both of you too. It's so great to have people from, the regions that were. I mean, obviously Finland has its own story, and we are going to do some stuff in the Kalevala. Absolutely. We're going to do some Kalevala stuff. Yep. But yeah, so great. So great. All right. Well, okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for your comments. Great to read all of that stuff. Okay, so for our final thoughts, talk about you already hinted towards dragon stuff a bunch. Why do we love a dragon? What's going on here? Why is a dragon always such a big deal? Not just because it's a big monster, big scary monster, and not only as Tolkien said because it proves the hero. But what do you think it is about the dragon that keeps? I mean, there's a reason I chose, not just that I know this part of the saga the best, but there's a reason I chose this to be kind of the lead bit that we would do for the Völsungasaga, and it's because everybody loves a dragon. Why is it? Why do dragons keep showing up in all the movies, all the books, the stories? What do you think?
I mean, it's because there's one that encircles the earth. And, like that's the, here there be dragons, is the Midgard serpent, it's because what a dragon is the absolute limit of your, when even with the word monster, right. Which comes from, an old Latin word that means, look at that. I can't tell. I have no explanation for what I'm seeing right now. Take a look at that thing. So a dragon is, and this is why, it's useless. It's worse than useless to try to put some kind of sort of D&D-ish taxonomy on these kinds of monsters, because the whole point is that they are beyond those categories. And when we encounter something outside of the category, there's this hope that it can be subdued and either made to work for us, or if it cannot be made to work for us, that it can be defeated so that human society and culture can begin to flourish. And part of that is, of course, eating the dragon, as was done with this dragon, but also as was done with the dragon that St. George killed. This is an important part of the dragon slaying story, is that when the dragon is done, you eat the dragon. When the dragon is killed, you sow his teeth, and warriors spring up, and they become the men of the city that you found, like all these different things. Yeah. So the dragon is death, but it is also the possibility of new life. And there's no other symbol that resonates with us on the same level that the dragon does. There's no other symbol that does the same thing, that is so universally recognizable. Even in the East, a lot of people are like, oh, Asian dragons are totally different from European dragons. Basically, my research and feeling is that is not at all true. You could say that the way that we approach dragons is sometimes different, but there are sometimes helpful dragons. There are, there are even Western cultures in which, dragons can be good luck. Think about whales, and for instance. You can think about Arthur's, whose name means like the head of the dragon, the pen dragon, the head of the dragon, or the head dragon, the chief dragon, right? So It's this fierce, terrifying thing. It's the edge of everything that you can know. You can't put it in a category. You can't come up with an explanation for it. The only thing you can do is to reckon with it. And what's really interesting is sometimes a dragon comes looking for you, as it does in Beowulf.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're crazy enough to go looking for the dragon, and that's what Sigurd does. And that interesting difference between them, and obviously they have a lot of similarities, but there's also some interesting differences between them and their kind of heroism. So that'll be something we talk more about in the coming weeks.
Yeah, this is something I think about a lot, and I don't really have any strong answers for it. But the thing that, I mean, I love everything you just said, but the thing that I wanted to add to all of that is I think there's something very primal about a dragon. And part of that may be this seraphic image of the flaming serpent that guards the throne of the Most High God. You know, so that's what Seraphim are in their most ancient depiction. Now we have this sort of, you know, a head with wings kind of thing in iconography.
Still pretty terrifying.
Yes, absolutely. But still, actually, you can still see draconic Seraphim sometimes on iconostases. You know, particularly up near where if there's a cross in the center on the top of the iconostasis. And so I think there's something about it that's about divinity, but it's also about access to divinity. And so, you know, how do I access divinity? There is, as you said, there are good dragons, right? The Seraphim are created by God to be at his throne. But then, of course, also there is a tradition that the devil is a fallen seraph, or a fallen cherub, as it is in Ezekiel. These are just kind of interchangeable kinds of ideas in certain ways. And so I think that part of why it's so primal is because man is made to desire the divine. And so much about what a dragon is, whether it's slaying the dragon to get to the gold, whether it's eating the dragon to get his power, whatever it might be, there's something about access to humans becoming more higher than they are. You know, and so there's actually, I think that in the dragon, there is a voice speaking about deification. There's a voice speaking about theosis, and that a lot of what goes on then in stories is about grasping it in the wrong way. You know, I mean, that's what greed is. Greed is to grasp something good in the wrong way. And of course, that's such a powerful motivator in this particular story. So yeah, I think that there's something about divine longing in dragons as well. So yeah, so much more that one could say about it. Okay, so I know you're looking at the script right now, Deacon Seraphim, and what's the next line that you see?
Oh boy, this next line says that I'm supposed to go ahead and delve into a very detailed schematic description of the Völsung legends. Is that
no? It doesn't say that.
Be next episode.
It does not say
okay.
that.
Well,
no.
well. Oh, sorry. It says a thing I'm not telling Deacon Seraphim. That's what.
There you go. So, yes, I decided, since it's a new year, and we're inaugurating a new series, I thought I would add something to the show. And you know, listeners, I did not consult with the good deacon. That literally, it is in the script. It says the thing that I'm not telling him.
All right.
And so this is what it is. I'm going to make a pronouncement. You ready? All right. YouTube viewers can see the look on his face that he looks ready, but he's not really sure what it is I'm about to say. Be it hereby declared that for his glorious deeds and great fame, for his avenging of his father, for his slaying of the old wyrm of the north, Fáfnir, Hríðmarsson, for his wooing of the Valkyrie Brynhild, and for his many other valorous deeds, too many to be named, the highest authority of the Great Tales podcast hereby bestows upon Sigurd Sigmundsson Fáfnirsbane the high, exalted, and truly redoubtable title of Friend of the Show.
Oh.
May he be hailed unto the end of time with all the honors, rights, privileges, and high muckety muckness that appertain thereto, done this 2nd day of January in the year of our Lord 2026. I think we should have friends of the show, and this is going to be our first one. I think Sigurd is a good friend of the show to begin with.
All right. I don't exactly know what friend of the show means. I think it doesn't just mean like if they ever call it, if they ever call in, they're allowed to talk to us. Because I mean, heck yeah, if for some reason Sigurd is on the phone, first of all, I have questions.
It can mean whatever
secondly,
we want it to mean.
You can definitely. It
doesn't.
All right.
It could mean admiration. It could also mean, yeah, we want that guy on the show. It doesn't necessarily mean that we endorse every single thing that they do and say. But I think he's a good friend of the show to begin with. So from here on, we'll take nominations for other friends of the show. Not everybody gets in.
Sigurd gets to be friend of the show, but not Oedipus. That's what you're telling me.
I mean, there's something I like about reading Oedipus' story, but I don't think I'd want him around.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I feel like I think that's probably right. I think the whole thing, where like he curses his sons for like getting dinner overcooked, that's probably like I think I could, I feel like I could probably hang. I'm enough of a bro. I feel like I could hang with Sigurd. Like me and Sigurd, we could go on Rogan together.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Sigurd Sigmundsson,
it's like dragons are incredible, 100%. Anyway, okay, all right. So
exactly. So that's our episode for today.
Well, thanks for tuning in to the beginning of #Hoary Northern Winter. This is just the beginning. It's all going to go up in flames by the end, of course, but as of yet, the rime frost has not even begun to melt. So if you want more of the frozen details, please like, subscribe, share, and review. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get the best podcasts.
And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you click the little bell so that you get notified every time we release a new episode.
Until next time, fare you well wherever you fare, and be sure to stay away from glamored gold.
This has been a listener and viewer-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.